Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I would like to call this Monday, August 14th, 2023 meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to everyone who is watching online. We will start our meeting as we always do. If you are able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all so much. And as I said, thanks for being here. We've got a good group in the council chambers this evening. I know there's a lot of folks watching online as well. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. First order of business tonight is to get an agenda for this evening. Our agenda this evening includes six items under our introductory items. The first is a proclamation for our Sister City 30th Anniversary Recognition Day, which I'm excited about. Second is our Sister City Delegation will be doing a presentation, the student delegation. I'm very excited about that. Item 2.3 will be introducing our new employees as we do. We have our friends here from the League of Minnesota Cities to make a presentation regarding our 2023 Sustainable City Award that the city received back in June. Item 2.5, we will have a presentation regarding the Resilient Communities Project. And then on 2.6, we'll have a mission moment discussion about our employee resource group introductions. Under our consent items, Councilmember Carter has the consent business tonight. We are going to remove item 3.7 from our consent business. That is the architect contract for the Bryant Park Building Design and Construction Administration. Staff would like a bit more time with that, so we're going to remove item 3.7 from our consent business. Under item 4, our hearings and resolutions and ordinances, we have but one public hearing this evening. Item 4.1 is a public hearing regarding a change of conditional of approval. And finally, under our organizational business, some interesting presentations. 5.1 is a neighborhood traffic management program screening scenarios and a discussion about the possible budgets. Item 5.2, recommendations regarding our municipal solar projects. Item 5.3, an update on our opioid task force work plan, and we will finish our meeting as we do with item 5.4, our city council policy and issue updates. So council, unless there's any changes or additions, subtractions, I would offer the agenda as stated, noting of course item 3.7 being pulled out of the agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to accept tonight's agenda as stated. No further discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0, and we have an agenda. Thank you all very much. Our first agenda item tonight is a resolution, a proclamation for our Sister City 30th Anniversary Recognition Day, and I'm going to head down to the podium. So this is an exciting week here in Bloomington. We have a delegation here from Izumi, Japan, which is Bloomington's sister city. And we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of this sister city relationship between our two great communities. We've had a group here of officials from the city. We have a student group. I don't know where they went. They're out there. Okay, no, we're not ready for them yet. We're not ready for them yet. We've had a student group. We have been doing our sister city organization that has planned this and has been the conduit for all of the work that has gone on, have been great hosts and have had a number of activities and events for our guests. And it's one of the things we wanted to be sure to do tonight was officially, through proclamation, was officially recognize the 30th anniversary of this sister city relationship between our two communities. So I am proud to read this proclamation. A Sister City 30th Anniversary Recognition Day, August 14th, 2023. Whereas, 30 years ago, the city of Bloomington, Minnesota, United States of America, and the city of Izumi, Osaka Prefecture, Japan, expressed a desire to deepen friendship and mutual understanding between the two cities through educational, cultural, industrial, and commercial exchanges. And whereas, on November 24th, 1993, Izumi Mayor Tadao Akeda and Bloomington Mayor Neil Peterson signed a declaration of sister city affiliation between the two cities. And whereas the cities of Izumi and Bloomington pledged to strengthen the ties of friendship between Japan and the United States, thus contributing to peace and prosperity in the world. And whereas the two cities have sponsored many mayoral and student visits throughout the years in collaboration with the Bloomington Sister City Organization and Izumi International Exchange Association. And whereas Mayor Hiromichi I apologize. Hiromichi Sushi has led two delegations of officials and students from Izumi to visit Bloomington on August 11th through the 15th, 2023, to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Sister City relationship between the two cities, hosted by the Bloomington Sister City Organization. Now therefore, I, Tim Bussey, Mayor of the City of Bloomington, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Monday, August 14th, 2023, as Sister City 30th Anniversary Recognition Day in Bloomington. And I direct that the flag of Japan be flown at Bloomington Civic Plaza in honor of our sister city, Izumi, Osaka Prefecture, Japan, dated this 14th day of August, 2023, with my signature. I don't know if you noticed as you drove in, but the flag is already flying, which we're proud to see. And as I said, we've had a number of activities and events. We had an event this morning where Mayor Peterson joined us and made some remarks and offered a perspective from 30 years ago, the importance of not only bringing city officials to the United States, to Bloomington, but more importantly, bringing young people to Bloomington. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But right now, I would like to invite the mayor forward and make the official recognition, the proclamation. If you could come forward, Mayor, we could officially shake your hand and say congratulations and make this, and we can face here so that we can get the pictures in. Very good. And Mayor, if you would like to say a few words? I will step aside here. You can use the microphone on the other side here.
Good evening, everybody. I am Hiromichi Tsuji, Mayor of Izumi City. 通訳お願いしますね。インタープリテーター。
日本語に
このような本日は機会を作っていただきまして心から感謝申し上げます。
Thank you for giving me this opportunity tonight.
私は市長に就任してから今回3度目の訪問をさせていただきました。
This is my third visit to Bloomington ever since I've been the mayor of Izumi City.
毎回ブルミントンに来て自然とまた街の街並みを見て素晴らしい街だと感じていますが、今回は今までに最高のおもてなしもいただき、本当にブルミントンを第二のふるさとと思うぐらい感謝をいたしております。
So ever since each time I come to Bloomington, I'm very surprised at the nature and everything that you have in Bloomington. But this time, with the outstanding warm hospitality, the visit has been very, very nice to us. Now that after all these three visits, and especially with this time, I take Bloomington as my second hometown.
これもティム・ブッセ市長をはじめ歴代の市長の皆様方、またブルミントンの皆様方との交友の積み重ねがあってこそだと感謝をいたしております。
This results all from the mayors, not only Mayor Busset, but the mayors before and all the Bloomington citizens who have been so cooperative and supportive to this program.
今回30周年ということですけども、これから40周年、50周年に向けてまた学生たちも交流をもっと深めていっていただけるというふうに思っておりますし、我々も100周年経った時もこのような関係を 維持できるようにしっかりと後世につなげていきたいと思います。今後ともよろしくお願いいたします。
Okay, now we are celebrating the 30th anniversary. I hope that we will have the 40th and 50th. And moreover, I hope that we will be able to reach to 100 celebration anniversary. And also we would like to exchange students more often, frequently, and so that we will be able to have a stronger bond between the two cities. And I hope that we will be able to cooperate as long as we can. And thank you so much.
ブルーミントン市のますますの発展とブルーミントン市と泉市の友情がさらに深まりますことをお祈り申し上げまして挨拶とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
I wish for Bloomington further prosperity and stronger bonds between the two cities. And thank you so much.
Now, you may think because, this has all been so seamless and it's been such a wonderful week that this kind of thing just happens, but it does not. It takes an enormous local effort to make this all happen. And we are blessed to have a sister city organization here in the city of Bloomington dedicated to making sure that this relationship continues not only to survive, but to thrive. And I want to thank them personally for all of Bloomington for the work that went into this. And I want to call up Kelly Lohman right now, present you with a copy of the proclamation that we presented earlier today, and to thank you personally for the work that you've done on all of this. Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Did you want to say anything as well? There? Yes, okay. Please do. Why don't you address the crowd as president of the council?
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Bussey. Thank you, Council. So I am Kelly Lohman, president of the Bloomington Sister City Organization, and I'm so happy that we can be here tonight to celebrate our 30th anniversary. We can't do this alone, so I really want to thank the Bloomington Sister City Organization Board and the City of Bloomington for everything they've done to get this going, and the Visitor and Convention Bureau and the Mall of America for all their help and support as we've been planning this delegation. I will now introduce the student delegation to come up and be able to present.
Thank you, Kelly. As Kelly mentioned, we have a student group in the city as well, and they have made the trip, and they are prepared to make a presentation to both the city council and to the city about their experience and their stay here. So come on up, come on up. Is this where? Oh, you know what? I'm going to have you guys come over here. Let's do it this way and make the presentation to the council. So if you could come over here.
Okay.
Let's see.
Is that okay?
Pardon me?
Can I just start the presentation just like that? Also, can they see the screen?
We have screens up there, and we're going to need everybody to talk into the microphone so the people watching at home can hear you as well. Okay?
What?
All right.
People watching at home?
Oh yes.
What? Is this like?
Be yourself. Just relax. Enjoy.
Okay, thank
All right.
you. Alright. Can I just start? Okay. All right. Hello. We're student delegates from Izumi. My name's Rihanna. I'm kind of like the leader of this troop. I don't do much though. So I've we've prepared a presentation about our city, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. Okay. Wait, why is this not working? Oh, oops. Okay. So first, I'm going to be beginning with the history of Izumi. I'm just going to be explaining about it. I'm not going to be talking about all the like periods in Japanese history. I'm just going to be like talking about the important parts, so I'll be skipping around the place. Okay. So I'll start at the very beginning at the Jomon period, where this is like when people started living in Japan. So people made clay pots with court patterns, and these court patterns are called jomon. And the pots are called jomon pots. So this is why it's called the Jomon period. So the person who actually found the first clay pot is an American zoologist called Edward Sylvester Morse. And so this right here is a clay mask that was found from a Jomon period village ruin in Izumi. And I'm not really sure if the person made this had terrible art skills or like art was appreciated like this a long time ago. Okay, so next I'll be talking about the Yoi period, which is this could be like the longest part in the presentation, so please bear with me. Okay, this one. Okay. So the most important thing that happened in this period is the cultivation of rice. People from China came and introduced rice to the people living in Japan. And we thought it tasted good, it grew well in our climate, so we're like, yeah, we're keeping it. And a very important site in history is called the Ikegami Sona ruins. This is from the Yoi period, and it was actually found in the dirt, but now we have restored buildings there, so you can just go in there and see what people lived in there. And these are some things found in the ruins, like we found clay pots. These beads are for accessories, and sword tips and stone blades for harvesting rice. And okay, so I'll just explain quickly. So cities in Japan make these characters that symbolize and like mascots. They're kind of like mascots for a sports team, and we just have them for cities. And these are the ones for Izumi City. And these people are based on what people looked like back in the Yoi period, because there's a lot of historical sites from this period, and it has really has a lot of cultural and historical significance. Okay. Next, I'll be talking about the Nara period. This is just really quick. Nothing much happened. This is just when the place that is now Izumi City was called Land of Izumi. I'll be talking about the Heian period, where court aristocrats shaped a large part of Japanese culture. Like, they did some poems and writings, and they also built many temples and shrines. I'm just going to introduce one temple, or it's like a cluster of temples on a mountainside. They're really beautiful, and they're really interesting because so there were 73 temples when they were built, but there's only 4 now. This is because over the years there were like fires, battles, and earthquakes, and now they've all disappeared, and there's only 4 now. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm just gonna explain quickly about the Kamakura Sengoku period. Well, samurai appeared, and like Japan was ruled by shogun and not the emperor at this time, and there were many wars. Meanwhile, Columbus arrived at America, and so this is kind of like the beginning of American history as we know it now. Moving on to the Edo period, this is when the political center was moved to Edo, which is now Tokyo. A lot of traditional Japanese arts and activities were created, like Japanese tea ceremonies, sweets, and arts. There's going to be more on this later. So, yeah. And then in America, the Declaration of Independence was signed. And 100 years later after this, Matthew Calvert Perry came to Japan and convinces the government to open up its borders since it was in national isolation. This is kind of the beginning of America and Japan kind of like going in between each other and talking and stuff. Not sure. Okay, so for the Taisho period, this is when there was a lot of industrial development. Like, people started making artificial pearls out of glass and also glass decorations. It's actually a brand now. There are also a lot of weaving mills built for the textile industry, and it's called Izumi Cotton. It's kind of like a brand of cotton. That's really nice, yeah. We've had like bags and handkerchiefs made for it. Okay, and during the Showa period, this is when Izumi City was created. We have a long history, but then this is just when it became a city. And the Heisei period, wait, it's not moving. Why is it not working? Oh, okay, there we go. Is when Izumi City and Bloomington became sister cities. That was back in 1993. Yeah. And that's about it for the history of Izumi. Thank you all for listening. Yeah, that's it for me.
Next, I'm going to talk about nature of Izumi City. I will introduce it in 3 parts. First, it's about agricultural products. Izumi City grows a lot of agricultural products. Izumi City is famous for its tangerines. It's one of the top producers in Osaka. It collaborated with companies to promote the tangerines. There is also a unique character, Michi. Mizunasu is also famous. If you put this in nuka, you can make something like pickles. It's very delicious. We also grow onions, tomatoes, strawberries, and flowers. Second, it's about Izumi Recycle Park. This park was used to a landfill for industrial waste. After burning was completed, the site was turned into a park as a natural relaxing place. There are a farm, a playground, a herb garden, a Japan garden, and so on. Many plants can see in each season. Finally, it's about our nature. Izumi City has a lot of nature. For example, there is a big park near my house. Also, there is a river near our school, and cherry blossoms bloom in the spring. This is the end of my part. Thank you.
Next, I'll introduce about Komyo Pond. Komyo was named after Empress Komyo. During the Nara era, it's said that Empress Komyo was born in Izumi City. We needed a lot of agricultural water in Showa era, so Komyo Pond was artificially made. We have been receiving the great water grape before from Komyo Pond, and we can see beautiful scenery in Izumi City. If you come to Japan, please come visit Izumi City. Thank you.
So now, we'll talk about Japanese culture. First, I'll introduce about art. In Izumi City, there is a Kuboso Museum town called a town full of art. There are many artworks not only in Kuboso Museum.
So to make the clicker work best, if you point it that direction.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No,
Okay.
you're fine.
But also lots of places such as walls of buildings. Second, I'll introduce about the shopping mall called Lalaport in Izumi. Lalaport Izumi is the greatest shopping mall in southern Osaka. There are a lot of popular brands of home and abroad, miscellaneous goods, and restaurants. That's over 200 stores. Our family can enjoy because there are amusement and kids park. There is a Costco next to Lalaport, and we can go there on foot. Thank you.
Now I'll introduce about Japanese sweet. This traditional Japanese confectionery is characterized by its soft and gentle sweetness. It is also considered a 5 sense work of art: taste, smell, hearing, sight, and touch. It is also designed to represent the seasons and is very tasty. That's all about me. Thank you.
Next, I'll introduce the day of our school day. School starts at 8:30. We wear uniforms at school. Actually, we should not wear earrings in Japanese schools. This is a school building and my classroom. There is no locker, and we hang our backpacks next to our desks. Classes start at 8:50. There are 4 50-minute classes and 3 10-minute breaks. Lunchtime is from 12:40. Japanese school lunch has a daily menu, and nutrition balance is considered. We decide on lunch duty and work together to prepare lunch. After lunch, it's lunch break. Some students play with the ball outside. There are 2 classes from 1:35. After that, everyone cleans the school. Students clean up the school. After school, some people do club activities and student council activities. This is our school day. Thank you.
Okay, so that's all for our presentation, and we were like really nervous. Like personally, I kind of like mispronounced a few words. I was like really nervous, but thank you for listening. I think we worked really hard on this, and I hope like you visit Izumi like someday. It's a really nice place. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much, and you did a fantastic job. You did. Mispronouncing, that's not, don't worry about that. You did a fantastic job. I know you were nervous, and you all did a wonderful, wonderful job. There's one last thing I would like for you to do for us, though.
Okay.
If you could all take turns, introduce yourself, tell us your name, how old you are, and what your favorite part of being here in Bloomington has been so far.
Okay. Me first?
Right on down the line.
Okay,
Perfect.
I don't know why. All right, so my name's Rihanna Masaki. I'm 13. My favorite part of being here is like the nature. We have a lot of trees and parks, and there are like squirrels and rabbits, and I'm just amazed of how much wildlife there is. I really love animals, so I'm just really happy to be here. Thank you.
Very glad to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Konomi. I'm 15 years old, and I love here Bloomington because there are many lakes, beautiful lakes. I love nature, so I'm very glad. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yushi Nomoto. I'm 15 years old. I'm glad to come to here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Misako. I'm 14 years old. I'm glad to Bloomington. I like more of America very much. So we are going to go to Mall of America the day after tomorrow, so I'm very looking forward to it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nene Tanaka, and I'm 14 years old. And Bloomington is a very good place to live and also to like travel. And my most favorite thing of Bloomington is cookie was very delicious. And also like lakes are very beautiful. And I did jet ski, and it was pretty fun. Yeah, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Honoka Ueno. I'm 15 years old. This time is first trip to go abroad. I'm little nervous, but I'm glad to meet you. Yes, I like talking with people. So please talk with me. Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to meet all of you and get to know you a little bit more, and I'm very glad you've had a fun time here in Bloomington, and we'll continue to have a fun time at Mall of America the day after tomorrow. Yes, absolutely. And again, to the official delegation, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for joining us today, and can't wait to visit you very, very soon. So thank you. Now, I know you all have a dinner reservation coming up, so we will certainly not be offended in any way if you take your leave and say goodnight to us and go eat dinner. We'd love to have you do that. So,
Mayor, if I could say one thing.
Oh, yes, Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to just say I won't be able to make it to dinner this evening, but you're in good hands with my wife. I hope that you will have a safe trip home. I know that there is a storm there, and so I hope that your family is safe. We look forward to seeing you with the mayor.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up on our agenda is item 2.3, the introduction of new employees. Carl, I don't envy you having to follow that up, but
So, Mayor, just don't ask my age. Mayor and Council, we have 5 new employees from Public Works that I'd like to introduce this evening. And the first 2 are in our administration department, and Jamila Boudlali is the first. Jamila, come on up. You may recognize Jamila. She made a presentation to you a couple months ago as part of her master's capstone project. She just recently graduated from the University of Minnesota with a master's degree in urban planning with an emphasis on housing and community development. And again, her capstone project worked with our staff primarily in community development, having to do with an analysis of affordable housing in the community. And you saw a presentation of that. She is working with Emma Struss in our sustainability group, and so she's learning all things energy and transportation and developing relationships both within the city and within the community. When she's not here at work, she enjoys exploring parks, traveling, and trying new types of tea. So, Jamila.
Hello. It's great to be with you all again. It's been a few months. So I've been learning a lot over these few months, and I think Carl summed up a lot of the things. I'm just really excited to be here and to be learning, and I think this job is a really good role for me, and I have an awesome team. And I love that I get to also work throughout the city with different departments and also to go out into the community. So again, just excited to be here and happy. Yeah,
We're very glad to have you on board. Welcome, Jamila. Thank you.
thanks.
And also in our administration group is Claire Pardubsky. Claire is a solid waste sustainability specialist. So she is joining us from graduating at the University of Minnesota with a degree, 2 degrees in psychology and Spanish. Her past 2 years were with the city of Minneapolis doing solid waste work. Claire's passionate about the issues at the intersection of climate and public health, and she's excited to be engaging with our residents and with our staff around solid waste issues. Outside of work, Claire enjoys time outside, climbing and reading, or playing board games. Claire.
Yeah, that about sums it up. Hi, nice to meet you, Council. I'm happy to be here as well. It's been a good first couple of months, and I'm similar to Jamila, really enjoying connecting with a new community and talking with folks about the great programs that the city has to offer. So happy to be here, and it's nice to meet all of you face to face.
Well, it's nice to meet you as well, and
Thanks.
hope to hear more about the psychology and Spanish connection to sustainability at some point.
Yeah, it's been an interesting road.
I'm sure.
Full of indecision.
Welcome
So,
aboard.
Thank you.
Now we're switching over to our engineering division, and I'd like to introduce Davis Peterson. He's a new civil engineering technician with us. Davis grew up in Prior Lake, which I know the mayor and myself are kind of fond of. He just graduated from Minnesota State University in Mankato with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And he just passed his EIT test, which is an engineer in training. It's a kind of a wicked, long kind of technical test to make sure that you paid attention during school. and he did. He passed that. So he's well onto his way of becoming a professional engineer. In his free time, he likes to play beach volleyball with his friends and to be outdoors.
Yeah, as Carl said, I passed my EIT, so I'm looking to kind of continue my years and experience here. And then with that as well, like I interned here this last summer, and I was just very impressed with like our engineering division. And so I kind of just, I enjoyed it, and I had an opportunity to apply, and I got the position. I'm happy to be working here right now.
We're happy to have you on board, Davis, and I'm happy to hear an internship led to a position. That's I love to hear that, and I love to see that happen. So welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Our last 2 employees are our new lab analysts at our water treatment plant. They're both named Elizabeth. And so we thought that might be somewhat of a problem, but I'm happy to say they both don't go by Elizabeth. So first is Lisa Goodman, a lab analyst. She comes to us with a bachelor's degree in agriculture and chemistry from the University of Wisconsin in River Falls. She has 14 years of lab analyst experience, and she has worked at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and for the past 6 years with Twin Cities Water Clinic, so a very similar kind of work to what we do at our water plant. She is a longtime resident of Bloomington, and in her free time, she enjoys fly fishing, gardening, and camping.
All right. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as he said, I've been a resident of Bloomington, I think 32 years, and I've raised 3 daughters. They're all in their 20s now. So it's really, it's kind of fun. We've done a lot of volunteering in the city, and I've spent a lot of time here. So it's very satisfying to serve the city of Bloomington as an employee. And it's also fun to work in the water lab, and when we get Bush Lake Beach samples in, I remember sitting there with my kids for many hours, and I know where all these water samples are coming from. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us tonight, Lisa. Thanks for welcome aboard. Thank you.
So our final employee for this evening is Libby Stahl. Libby, as I noted, is a lab analyst. She comes with us with a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and Chemistry and an associate's degree in biotechnology. She's has more than 10 years of experience in this field, including wastewater treatment for the city of Whitewater in Wisconsin and doing microbiology work for Summit Brewing Company in St. Paul. So in her free time, she enjoys traveling and outdoor adventures. Libby.
I just want to say thanks for the welcome. It's nice to be here. It's, I think, a neat way to connect to the city council and introduce employees. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you here. And I will point out the brewery mentioned got the biggest reaction from the council.
It's good beer.
Welcome aboard. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Carl. So welcome all to all of our new employees. Welcome aboard. Looking forward to seeing you around City Hall and out in the community. So very well done, and glad to have you on board. Thank you much. Next up on our agenda is item 2.4, and this is a presentation from our friends at the League of Minnesota Cities. Luke Fisher and Craig Johnson. Luke is the executive director. Craig is on the IGR team. Good friends of Bloomington, good friends of mine. Always glad to see you here. You'll notice we did put one presentation between you and the kids because it's, you know, you never want to share the stage with kids or animals, right? And
yeah, no, we appreciate that. As I was waiting to come up, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I was just hoping to have the bravery of those students to come and give a presentation in a different country in a different language than is home for you. They were an impressive group, and what a neat partnership that you have with Bloomington and Izumi. That's something you should be really proud of and probably meritorious of an award at some point in time, right? For that connection. That's what we're here to do tonight. We're here to talk a little bit about some recognition that you earned from the League of Minnesota Cities at our annual conference this year. Before we talk about the recognition specifically, though, I always think it's a little bit helpful to remind you and the public who we are, because I think that context matters. I think that context matters a lot because we're here to recognize you as a leader amongst your peer communities. So as an association, the League of Minnesota Cities represents 838 of the state's 855 cities. Can you guess our largest member? This is the interactive part. Here we go. Minneapolis, thank you, 425,000 people. Our smallest member is the city of Barrie. Does anybody want to guess Barrie's population?
8.
Okay, numbers are flying fast now. I like this. They've got 19 people that live in Barrie, and as an association, we've got to provide resources to everyone from Minneapolis to Bloomington to Barrie and all points in between. As an association, we get to have a lot of interaction with our members. We have a research hotline if people have questions about what to do. We've got people like Craig that advocate on your behalf at the Capitol. We do training and conferences, and you all are active participants in that. You know that well. And we provide insurance for our members. So we get to see the best of the best all the time. And today we're here to recognize you as one of the best of the best. One of my favorite parts about my job and the work that I get to do at the League of Minnesota Cities is put a spotlight on people who are getting it right. So on behalf of our board of directors and all of our members, we want to congratulate you for earning this recognition. And Craig's going to talk a little bit about what you did.
Yeah. And are we watching a video on this today too? Or
Yep.
Why don't we do that before we mention the award so you can see the presentation that all of the city members at the League's annual conference were able to watch when they loudly cheered for the city of Bloomington for the work you've been doing. So as soon as we have that ready to go.
Bloomington is the 4th largest city in the state of Minnesota. We're the 3rd largest city here in the metropolitan area. We're at about 90,000 people, and our population has been steady over the past 15 years or so. But in those years, we've also realized the importance and the need to expand our sustainability work that we do here in the city.
A number of years ago, we've had a program for a long time called Curbside Pickup, which happened every year, and folks could put their bulky items out on the curb and be collected. We realized that it was creating too much waste that was just going directly into the landfills.
This new program provides several different opportunities for residents to manage bulky items. What those elements entail include a monthly pickup opportunity for residents to have certain reusable and recyclable bulky items picked up once a month.
This isn't just about picking up litter and recycling more and putting things in the right bin. This is about the future of our entire environment, about our planet, and we're working hard on a number of different goals to try to achieve things that we can ensure that future generations that come behind us will have a planet to live in.
One of the biggest issues is climate change, and so we have a number of different ways that we're approaching that through transportation, through looking at housing and energy efficiency across the board. But solid waste is actually part of the climate change effort as well, because what most people don't think about is that there is a very strong link between our garbage and greenhouse gases and climate change.
The city has a goal of recycling and composting up to 75% of our waste by 2030 in partnership with the state of Minnesota's goals. We know that in 2020 alone, our program generated over 1,500 tons of waste sent to the landfill during curbside cleanup. So one of our main goals in this program is to reduce that number.
We had thousands of residents of Bloomington that took part in online surveys, that took part in online comment periods, that attended public events and really expressed their opinion, and we listened. We actually made a number of changes to our initial proposal as a result of that public engagement, and that's what created the program that we have today.
One of the tools we were able to utilize for community engagement was called Let's Talk Bloomington, and this is an interactive website that allows the city to not only share a lot of information with residents about upcoming projects, but also get feedback in a lot of creative ways.
I think we're getting close to the point where sustainability becomes a differentiator and a deciding factor for folks when they decide whether or not to move into a community. Much like the school system, much like the transportation system, the number of parks. I think they look at a city's commitment to sustainable practices and sustainability in general. I think that really plays a part and really plays a role in their final decision.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are here today to congratulate the city of Bloomington on earning the Sustainable Cities Award for 2023 from the League of Minnesota Cities, especially near and dear to my heart as the person who represents cities on energy, environment, and land use issues. I get to spend a lot of time with your public works and solid waste folks, and it's a very deserving award for your bulk items management program, which is taking the amount of waste you heard in that video and removing a lot of it. And instead of it now going to a landfill, those large bulk items are being brought to a place where they can have their recyclable content removed instead of just thrown into a landfill. So congratulations. That's the award that you received from the League at the annual conference. And I need to explain one thing. That award is tied to the Green Step Cities program that you saw referenced several times in that video. Prior to this year, Bloomington had earned up through step 3. And this year, you were awarded by the Green Step Cities program with steps 4 and 5. And so, Laura, if you could come up. Laura Horner is the person we have worked with on this, and I get the pleasure of working with her through a number of trade associations on solid waste policy. So, Laura, here, I will hand back to you your award for steps 4 and 5. And your blocks that you can add to your collection of wood items that represent Green Step Cities. They keep it simple. It's recycled wood. So congratulations to the city, to the leaders who have made that possible, and to the staff that do the work.
Laura, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think just on behalf of the city, we'd like to thank the League for the recognition. It's been a great opportunity for us to kind of showcase some of the work that we've been doing here. Our curbside cleanup, as many people know, is a very popular program here in Bloomington, but we know also that it did create quite a lot of waste. So it took a lot of engagement with residents to make those changes, but we're happy with the way that it's gone so far. So thank you again for the recognition.
And thank you, Laura, and thank you. Thanks to Emma. Thanks to your growing sustainability team for the outstanding work that you all are doing and are taking this on one bit at a time, one step at a time, because it all does add up. Little by little, it adds up, and I think we're making a difference here in Bloomington. So thank you so very much. Craig and Luke, thank you for making the trip out here to Bloomington and spending a bit of time with us. You're always welcome to come back and say hello, and say hello to all of our friends at the League of Cities as you get back to St. Paul. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Next up on our agenda is item 2.5, and it continuing this list of very interesting things that we've got to discuss this evening. This is a project done by the folks at the University of Minnesota doing a study of the ripple effect mapping of the Bloomington Leadership Program. And I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to embarrass myself, but I also don't want to give away any teasers here. But Diane Kirby is going to introduce this and kick this off, and I'm very interested in hearing this presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. Earlier this summer, you heard from 2 of the 3 teams who completed Resilient Communities projects for the City of Bloomington. This program matches faculty and students from the University of Minnesota with local governments to work on projects that advance community resiliency, equity, and sustainability. The project you will hear about tonight evaluated the Bloomington Leadership Program in order to measure its effectiveness at strengthening civic participation and achieving the mission and objectives of the Bloomington Tomorrow Together strategic plan. 90 residents have participated in the Bloomington Leadership Program since its inception in 2017, including one of our council members. By the way, applications, and I want to plug this, applications will be accepted starting September 1 for the next Bloomington Leadership Program, which will take place in February through March 2024. Tonight, our student team from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs will present a short summary of the final report on the ripple effects of the Bloomington Leadership Program. Please welcome to the podium Annika Johnson and Rachel Benson, and also 2 other team members were involved in this project, Jason Pascal and Ruby DeBellis. Both of them could not be here tonight. And I just want to add, this team was outstanding to work with, and I think you'll be impressed with their report. So, welcome.
Annika and Rachel, good evening. Welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. All right, let's get this. We do have a PowerPoint presentation.
And just to let you know, the computer is that direction, so don't
Okay.
put the screen point that direction.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so thank you, Mayor Bussey and Council, for having us tonight. We are presenting From Ripples to Waves, Exploring Ripple Effects of the Bloomington Leadership Program. I'm Rachel Benson. This is Annika Johnson. The 2 of us, as well as our 2 team members, worked on a capstone at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs this past spring. We worked in collaboration with the Resilient Communities Project and the City of Bloomington. Our task was to evaluate the city's 5-year strategic plan called Bloomington Tomorrow Together. The 3 primary objectives of the plan are to create a more welcoming community, a healthier community, and a more economically equitable community. So we wanted to know, are city programs meeting the goals of the strategic plan? And furthermore, we wanted to find a one-size-fits-all kind of method to evaluate the impacts of city programming in general. So to do this, we decided to narrow our scope even further and focus on the Bloomington Leadership Program as a case study. The Bloomington Leadership Program, as Diane explained, is a participatory-based program that meets annually. There's an annual cohort that Bloomington residents are encouraged to apply to, and they meet for weekly sessions where they engage in leadership building skills, civic engagement skills, and ultimately learn more about the local functions of government. So we had a program to evaluate, and now we needed to find an evaluation tool. The tool that we landed on is called Ripple Effects Mapping, also known as REM. It's a collaborative, qualitative program evaluation method that brings together participants and stakeholders to visually map all of the impacts of a program, including intended and unintended impacts of that program. So this is the tool that we're here today to talk about. We think that this would be a great tool to evaluate city programs in general, especially participatory-based programs. And the beautiful thing about this tool is that you only need 1 2 to 2.5 hour long event to really get this evaluation in. You also need a maximum of 15 participants. Any more than that, and the discussion might not get as deep as necessary. So we had an event in mid-March for Bloomington Leadership Program alumni. The event started with one-to-one interviews where we put participants in pairs so they could interview each other about any highlights they got from the program, any successes they had, any new or deepened connections that they made due to their participation in the program. After that first 15 minutes, we then went into group share-out and impact mapping. So we allowed everyone to talk about what they discussed in their peer interviews, as well as just come up with any sort of impacts they made as a result of their participation in the program. We documented all those impacts in real time using something called X-Mind mapping, and so this activity is called mind mapping. About halfway through the event, we then gave participants a chance to have a break, and the four of us as facilitators put all of those impacts into different themes. And we brought those themes back to the group for the second half of the event and got feedback on whether they wanted to adjust those themes or if they had any other impacts they wanted to bring in that were relevant to those themes. We also had a geographic impact map activity, so we had a physical map on the wall where participants placed stickers to show where any physical impacts they might have made as a result of their participation in the program, and we followed up with an alumni survey afterwards in case they thought of something that they didn't bring up at the event. After that, after the event was over, the four of us got together and we coded all of this qualitative data against two different frameworks. One is the 7 Community Capitals framework, which we will not be discussing today, but I will make a note, we actually have a 1-hour-long presentation on your city's YouTube channel. So if you are really interested in using this tool in the future, you can definitely find that. But another framework we use is the BTT strategic goals. So we were able to code all of this data against those 3 goals in the BTT to see how well the Bloomington Leadership Program is doing in meeting the progress of those goals. We also did a smaller analysis using the maps. And on to our results. First, we're going to talk about the results of the map, and then I'll hand it over to Annika to talk about the mind mapping. So we had a lot of impacts from the Bloomington Leadership Program, and some of those impacts are not actually physical and don't show on this map. But of the physical impacts, we saw a lot of them at schools, at parks. All of those points you see on the map are where participants placed a sticker. And then I also overlaid a heat map over that so that we could see hot spots where a lot of impacts were happening. So, of course, there's a big hotspot over City Hall, and there's also quite a lot of hotspots on the eastern side of the city. And we were very happy to see that because we had looked at quality of life data and national community survey data, and we knew that Ward 4 needed the most attention to equitably meet the BTT. And so we were really excited to see that actually the most impacts happening by the Bloomington Leadership Program were in Ward 4.
Thank you. So let's get into results. This is the exciting part. When we coded everything, we coded things into 4 different themes, as you can see here, as well as pictures of some of the Bloomington Leadership Program participants. The first one I'll talk about is deepening engagement with local government. Okay, so this is in 0.6 font because the Bloomington Leadership Program participants had so many impacts. And what's great is that on this slide, it's not even all of them. So for deepening engagement with local government, some of the standouts were starting involvement in charter commissions, appointed to Bloomington Sustainability Commissions, and appointed to a council seat, as we have a member here. So, on to strengthening community involvement. Some of the notable points are deepen relationships with neighbors, hosting a forum on misinformation, and able to spot misinformation with a more informed lens. Energizing new leaders. There was one participant that turned a volunteer initiative into a nonprofit, and another one that co-founded a neighborhood solidarity group. And then on to gaining knowledge. My favorite here is having local law enforcement organize a racial profiling and implicit bias training, which is super important right now. Going on to the BTT strategic goals, we saw that the Bloomington Leadership Program actually hit the most in welcoming community. This is expected for one of these participatory programs. Typically, you don't see impacts in every single strategic goal. We did see a lot, though. And of the 143 reported effects, we saw 68% of those effects hit that welcoming community goal.
So we have a lot of recommendations. We want you to utilize future capstone groups. There's going to be a lot more master's students that are excited about this. I know a lot of people are coming to the Humphrey that are excited about engagement. And then also really put in budget for future evaluation efforts. That's how people, your citizens, know that you are making a difference in their city. Our Bloomington partners also scoped out some different programs that they could use REM, ripple effects mapping, in all sorts of different categories. So the Bloomington Police, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, the fire station, at the city at whole for advisory boards and commissions, Parks and Rec, as well as community outreach. So the big thing that you need to know is that the Bloomington Leadership Program is making a difference. There is an effect called the spiraling up effect, which basically means that once you start accumulating impacts, it starts growing more impacts. So the Bloomington Leadership Program is starting a whole bunch of impacts, and as you continue to run this program, that branch of all of the different mapping is only going to get more dense and bigger, and you'll need a lot smaller than 6-point font to do it on a presentation. Thank you so much. We're so excited to do this project, and Bloomington Leadership Program is it's really awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the information and the presentation. I'm sure the council's got a couple of questions. I guess I do, and I'm remembering back to the introduction to this. Did you come forward and choose the Bloomington Leadership Program, or was it assigned to you? How did you connect directly with Bloomington Leadership Program?
Originally, we were going to work on the BTT strategic goals at large. However, Diane suggested that the Bloomington Leadership Program would be an excellent, smaller portion of the BTT strategic goal to kind of focus on. We knew that there were a lot of impacts, and we knew that we were going to have a lot of results to map, which is a great first step for using this method.
And even your knowledge of and your attention to the BTT process, are you Bloomington natives, or had you just heard about it, or?
Ruby, one of our other group members, is actually a native of Bloomington. However, I grew up in St. Louis Park in Minneapolis, so I'm very well.
I grew up in Eden Prairie, so I was close.
We're familiar.
Well, thank you for this. Councilor, are any questions or comments? Or Councilmember D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. I don't know if you can answer this, and so I apologize if this is more of a question for Diane or the city manager, but the ripple effect process tends to look at what I would describe as unintended consequences, meaning not that they're bad or anything, but that they weren't necessarily defined ahead of time as these are the outcomes we're looking for. How do they compare to the outcomes that you knew we were looking for in that program? Did you do any comparison there? Were there things we thought were going to happen that didn't happen versus things that happened that we were like, aha, now we have validation from that ripple effect study that we got what we wanted out of it? Can you explain a little bit how those things work together?
So we actually went in with little information, which I think is kind of nice, especially as people are coming from the outside. We had no information of what the Bloomington Leadership Program was about. We came in, we went to an alumni celebration. It was super fun, but we didn't want to have any previous data to kind of impact how we coded things. And so it's all fresh. However, as future capstone groups come in, I'm sure that you could use that information because it's unbiased to validate what was supposed to happen.
We also didn't have a comparison between intended impacts and unintended, but I think we started to notice that there were some things that we wouldn't necessarily label with a different sort of evaluation method. So we heard a lot of, I reconnected with neighbors, or I got the confidence to testify in front of the council. So some of those things weren't necessarily something, that the Bloomington Leadership Program might say, you will reconnect with old friends, but they were still something that deeply impacted participants, and we still documented all of that, big and small impacts.
Councilmember Martin and then Councilmember Lohman. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I loved your title, kind of the ripple leading into the wave, and obviously you have a ripple and you add a little more energy and a little more energy and it grows and grows. I guess, what kind of feedback did you get from the group, especially considering that it had alumni in it, for ongoing support to, say, the alumni group? How many more touches does that take after somebody exits the program to keep that momentum and that wave building and building? Did we get any kind of feedback on that, or what does that look like after somebody's officially out of the cohort?
So that isn't really our area. However, we do know a little bit about it. I know that they're starting up alumni events now. It's something that was requested by a lot of participants because they wanted to reconnect with the cohort, especially as we went through COVID and things went a little bit more digital. People wanted more events, and that's actually happening because people requested it.
Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just so excited about this program. I was on the council when we got this thing started, and I remember when I was down in Rochester, and I said, hey, they're doing something like this, and I'd love to see us do something like this too. This would be great, so it's great to see this thing. Well, but really what my question is since we've got somebody on council, I'm really curious, because I haven't had the opportunity to go through it myself, what your take is on it, since you've been through it, you've seen this now. If you don't mind, I just want to put you on the spot.
Councilmember Moody, you're on the spot.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Lohman, for that. First of all, I want to thank you both and the rest of your group for doing this work. I think it really validates what the original idea is to create a more civically minded, more engaged community where people care for each other, want to do things that help support our community to make it better. And that's ultimately what I got out of it. It's the ability to meet your neighbors, to create connections that you didn't have before, to learn about how your city functions. Until I took that program, I had no idea how many departments there were here, how many people worked here, and how dedicated our staff is to serving the residents of Bloomington. And so that opened my eyes to everything that goes on in our city to try to keep it functioning so that people have a great place to live. If they work here, we have jobs for you here. Your kids go to school here. There's good schools. There's great parks. And so to keep all that going requires a lot of work, a lot of effort, and it requires people to stay engaged and involved with our city. And so I think that's ultimately what I got out of it and what I see the alumni group getting together quarterly right now to connect with each other and help inspire each other to do greater, bigger things that make Bloomington an incredible place to be. So very happy to have gone through that program, incredibly proud of what we've been able to do, and looking forward to what's going to come in the future from that program.
Thank you, Councilmember. So you mentioned an hour-long video on our city's YouTube channel.
Yes.
Tell me just a little bit more about that, if you could, please.
So we cut this presentation down to 10 minutes. So there's at least, I think it's like 40 minutes to an hour.
It's like 55 minutes.
Oh,
yeah.
All right. Well, so it's long. So there's a lot more in-depth information about the background, kind of how it all started, as well as a step-by-step guide on how to kind of conduct REM. We actually got the chance to talk to Scott Chasden, who is an expert in ripple effects mapping. We have stuff about him in there, and there's just a whole bunch of details. We wanted to make sure that people in city departments were able to use this engagement method right off the bat, just by looking at maybe 2 other guides on how to do it.
Cool. Council, anything additional? So this capstone project, so you've completed your work at the Humphrey School, is that correct?
I have one more semester.
Yeah, one more semester.
But everyone else graduated.
And the capstone work, this type of multimedia, multidisciplinary kind of thing, it kind of replaces the Plan B, correct? Am I correct in saying that? You don't have to write a paper, right?
No.
Well, we did write a paper, though.
Oh, we wrote a paper about this. It's about 100 pages.
Wow.
But we didn't have to write a thesis.
A thesis, very good. Well, good for you.
Yes.
Well, congratulations, and thank you much for this information, and thanks for the work that you put into it and your interest in Bloomington, and the information you provided. I think we can find ways to put this to good use and use this to track the work that we're doing and use it as a benchmark, so 5 years from now we can take a look back and reevaluate one more time. So I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Diane, for shepherding them through all of this and pointing them in the right direction and making it closer to the leadership program as opposed to the BTT. Well done on that. Our final item under our introductory items is number 2.6, and this is an introduction to our employee resource groups, which is kind of a new thing here at the City of Bloomington, the specific employee resource groups. I see a number of folks coming forward, and rather than try and introduce everybody, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Nancy, you can kick it off for us, and we can get this going.
Well, Mayor and Council members, thank you for your time today. I'm Nancy Steele with Human Resources, and I have the privilege of speaking a little bit about employee resource groups before we share a couple of them that we have brought to Bloomington in the past few months. So with the endless vision of the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, they have introduced employee resource groups to Bloomington, which is a huge asset to any organization. They've been around for quite a long time. But what they do for an organization is create... Thank you. They create organizational supported group of employees that have shared common characteristics. So it could be a military group, veterans group, young professionals, seasoned professionals, or specific to gender, disability status, racial, sexual orientation, generation, or allies for the group. So it's not limited to necessarily just identifying with that group, but also for allies of that group. What Bloomington has added to our organization is a charter to create memberships for a single group. A charter comes with an executive sponsor and then at least 4 members in order to create the employee resource group. The goals and activities must be aligned around talent development, so that includes retention, hiring, recruitment, business operations, which includes the processes, practices, and projects, and then also organizational development, which could be internal or external, could be a cultural event or ongoing development. And Bloomington has added 4 employee resource groups thus far. The first 3 joined in fall of 2022, and 1 has joined it in 2023. So we have a couple members from some of those employee resource groups today to speak to some of the accomplishments that they have done. So I will pass it on to my colleagues with the Women ERG. Okay. Yeah, I will pass it over to AAPI, which has joined us in 2023.
Oh, the other one. AAPI.
It's coming.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Mary Lee. I am the chair of the Asian American Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. This group was created in 2023. So in May, we got the mayor proclamation recognizing May as the AAPI Heritage Month, and then also in that same month we did a tea tasting event. We brought in teas from different Asian countries, and we also brought in treats, just kind of sharing with city staff the different cultures in Asia. But I also want to share our mission. The mission is to promote an inclusive environment for all Asian identified employees, where members have the ability to share their culture heritage, offer educational and professional development opportunities, and advocate for the communities we serve. So far, these are the 2 events we've had, but coming up in September, we are talking about having a Moon Festival event, just kind of celebrating that holiday. And then going forward, I think we have so much like events planned or like in our list, but there's so much we can only do. But we are planning to, I know it was mentioned about having Asian night market, but we've talked about also having like reaching out to Asian youths for a job fair, and just reaching out to different Asian operations in Bloomington and kind of learning their history and just recognizing them. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the amazing work the Asian American Pacific Islander Group has put forth already, and they just started this year. And I also thank their executive sponsor, Mike Sable, for supporting them in their work, and I'll pass it over to Women.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Denise Christensen, and I work in the City Manager's Office. And the Women's ERG kind of started out of just casual conversation with a few coworkers. Nancy Steele, Faith Jackson, and I were just kind of casually talking after I came back from maternity leave a couple years ago. And just the questions of like, wouldn't it have been nice if, or wouldn't it be great if the city of Bloomington had, which kind of sparked more conversations, which eventually led to the creation of the Women's ERG, with founders, myself, Colleen Herman-Franzen, Ellen Bialis, Nancy Steele, and then our executive sponsor, Melissa Manderscheid. And with the help of Faith Jackson, we had that created, and we've been active since October 2022. The purpose is to provide a space for connection, advocacy, and development in support of people who identify as women across the organization. And one of the things that I'm particularly proud of since the creation of the Women's ERG has been the creation of the paid parental leave policy, which Council adopted earlier this year. We have committed to hosting 6 events a year, and Colleen is going to talk about some of the events that we've had.
Thanks, Denise. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Colleen Herman-Franzen, and I'm a Communications Specialist in the Public Health Division. And I'm proud to be co-chair, along with Nancy, of the Women's ERG. I'm just going to touch on a few highlights from the past year. We've been pretty busy. We were here in March for the mayoral proclamation for Women's History Month, and I believe that was the first time that Bloomington had done that, so that was awesome to start that tradition. And then in March, we had a celebration in honor of International Women's Day, and we got the inspiration for that event from the Bloomington Black Employee Network, another ERG. So that's just one way that the ERGs are supporting each other. We had a great event. We had about 70 employees, and you'll see the picture up top is of some of the attendees at our selfie station with their equity statement cards. So that was just an awesome event. And then at that same event, employees who attended also nominated female professionals for a panel event. And in June, we held our first Women in Careers panel right here in this room. We had 35 attendees, and we recorded the event for staff who couldn't attend. So that was just a wonderful event, and it went so well that we've planned a second panel in September. So yeah, I think the only other thing I'll add is that I think the city should be really proud of the ERG program. Personally, it's been a great way to connect with employees across the city organization, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So I hope that it will continue to have support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, we have 2 other employee resource groups, the Bloomington Black Employee Network, or BBEN. They are not able to join us tonight. They will present later on in the year, but I will just say thank you to their leadership. Their events have been amazing, and Chief Hodges is their executive sponsor. And I will also say thanks to BBEN's leadership. They have brought all of the ERGs together in partnership to put on events for employees as well. And EDGE, Ethnic Diverse Group of Employees, has put together a huge event where they supported VEEP and brought together over 631 packages, helping 316 families. They're also kicking off something called the Passports to the World, where they are providing a space so that employees can share their stories. There's so much to gain from storytelling, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those events come down as well. And the executive sponsor for EDGE is Diane Kirby, so thank you for your sponsorship as well. Employee resource groups have such a asset to the organization. I think it's been mentioned a couple times, but the ability for inclusion and belonging and really a sense of excitement, or being able to find people that you can connect with and that you can gain your network. There's many people in the organization that we may not otherwise have opportunity to connect with that really are given that opportunity through employee resource groups. So I'm blessed that they are part of the Bloomington, and I appreciate Faith and her leadership for bringing them to Bloomington. any questions that you have about the employee resource groups.
Thank you for the presentation, first off. I can honestly say when you think about a strong and healthy employee network within a large organization like the City of Bloomington is, the first thing that you think of is not an employee resource group. That doesn't pop into my mind, I think. But to hear the connections made, the support offered, and not just the internal, but the external also, to do projects at Veep, to talk about career possibilities, I think is just a wonderful way of making those connections, as you said, and strengthening our employee base here. So, well done. I appreciate that we've got this here in the City of Bloomington, and they're very successful as well. Councilmember Lohman?
I do have 3 quick questions. We call them at the Federal Reserve ERNs, Employee Resource Networks. I had an opportunity to be a part of a few of those there, and at first I didn't think I wanted to do that, and I'm like, you know what, maybe I should do this. And so one question that I had, we got 3 real quick ones. One of the things that they have at the Federal Reserve is the opportunity to have additional trainings. And then there is a small budget that each ERN gets to utilize. And then there's a focus around a lot of collaboration. I thought I saw a lot of collaboration in there and trying to find ways to get all of the groups to kind of work together.
Yeah.
Are those 3 things all part of our ERGs?
Yeah, so but part of our ERGs, as you noted on the board, the talent development, business operations, and organizational development are really the tenets of the charter. So those are the 3 main priorities. There's definitely been opportunities for collaboration among each other, as well as for others to participate in the ERG event. Regarding budget, there has not been a clearly established budget just as of yet. We are working on it. And I apologize. Did I fully answer your question?
I talked about training, a small budget, and also collaboration. So
yeah. These are employee-led groups, so they do have a little bit of freedom in order to determine how they want to prioritize their time. I think mostly what we've seen so far is that there's so many ideas and so many things they'd like to spend their time on, but we also understand capacity and a reasonable amount of time to spend on each. So I think that's been something that's determined among each employee resource group is kind of what's their capacity, and not to overcompensate for their capacity. And we don't want them to spend too much time. We want them to reap the benefits, not necessarily have to work extra hard to make it happen.
Yeah, I got tapped at the Federal Reserve to help with the leadership piece of it, to write job descriptions and that type of thing. And I would like to say, I would encourage us to try to figure out some small budget type of piece that would help move that forward. I know there's always difficult times trying to figure out where all those resources come through. So I understand when I say that, that's a very challenging recommendation. So,
Council, additional questions, comments? Mr. Verbrugge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I want to thank Nancy and the others who joined for the presentation today. We've talked about the benefit of the ERGs to our organization, and it is important, the work that they're doing, and the affinity that it creates among our employees and across departments. And I think it helps the organization and individuals understand the value that we have for people who work here. One of the other important things is that we exist in a competitive marketplace, and we've talked about this, our desire to be an employer of choice. And many of our employees here are networked professionally, and the more that the ERGs become embedded in our organization and the more that they increase affinity, the more likely that word is going to get out, which will make this an even more desirable place for people to seek employment. When we welcome people into the organization, I often say to them, this is a two-way street. That we have selected them to work here. They selected us to apply in the first place, right? And so we want people to want to be in Bloomington. As a matter of fact, I think that's part of our mission statement, Mr. Mayor. So I want to acknowledge the work that the ERGs are doing to drive change within our organization and also the perception of our organization outside.
Thank you, Mr. Verbrugge. Well, thanks. Thanks for your work, all of you, and thanks for the time and effort you're putting into this, and thanks to the executive sponsors as well. I know that's not a small task, so thanks for your work there as well. Thank you. That wraps up our introductory parts, the part of our meeting. We'll move on to item 3 on our agenda right now, which is our consent agenda. Councilmember Carter has tonight's consent business. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have holds on 3.12 and 3.14. Do I have any additional holds? Okay, and so then with 3.7 removed, I would move to approve 3.1 through 3.6, 3.8 through 3.11, and then 3.13.
Motion by Councilmember Carter, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to accept tonight's consent business as stated. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, Councilmember Lohman had 3.12.
3.12, Councilmember Lohman.
Yeah, Mayor, I wanted to hold 3.12, which is approval of travel expenses for one of our council members that gained the, I was going to wait till later on, but we had an email that had come in from a resident. I know that I've had this question asked many a times of myself when council members travel and go other places. And there's many different ways in which that council members end up having that opportunity to really represent the city and have the opportunity to exchange knowledge, especially if they are an expert in their field of expertise. And then also there's the opportunity when folks get a chance to go to also bring business back as well, or new concepts and ideas. And, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting tonight, we got to see at least three different examples of how, and I know we've had a long commitment, and Mayor, I know you've been here longer than I have, around this idea of investing in our residents. We've got the Bloomington Leadership Program. We have our sister city organization where we look at international pieces, and we just saw the the ERG groups here. Sorry, those are all examples of that, and we have some very talented people on this council, and I know Councilmember Carter is particularly talented in the health part. And I'll just give you one example. I know that she worked with me on our a Metropolitan Alliance for Healthy Families, and we were working on that. We, with staff, helped to identify and determine that there'd be a better way to bring back additional resources and help more of our young people in our city by changing our program. Unfortunately, that meant that organization that we used to belong to, no longer exists. And here is another example here with 312, where her expertise is being called for in Puerto Rico, part of the United States, to represent the city of Bloomington. And I just want to say I am really excited that you'd have this opportunity. And this is just in keeping with the tradition of Bloomington of investing and bringing back the best policies that we can have in the city. So I don't know if there's anything more that you want to see, Councilmember Carter, but I just want to, just for residents, I think it's a good question to ask. Whenever we spend our resources in the city, that we ask those questions. And so I'm glad that resident had asked that question, but I wanted to just give you my perspective. Mayor, I'm not sure if you want to add to that at all.
I appreciate your perspective, Councilmember Lohman. I think Mr. Verbrugge would like to weigh in as well.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman. The conference specifically that Councilmember Carter is attending is also being attended by our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, Faith Jackson, our Community Development Director, Carla Henderson. The three of them were presenters at the Government Alliance on Race and Equity last year in Portland, and that presentation was so well received that other affiliated networks asked them specifically to give that same presentation at this conference. And so when we look at the conferences that we're attending, we do have a travel policy that we want to make sure that it is consistent with the objectives here at the city and how it's going to benefit the city. In this case, the conference itself, State of Black Health, may not seem like it necessarily connects here. The presentation is about identifying institutional injustices and how that connects to health outcomes. So we have both a racial equity strategic plan, and we also have our city's strategic plan, and both of those focus on healthy communities and outcomes, improved outcomes in health, and especially concentration on trying to drive better health outcomes in BIPOC communities within our community. So to the extent that we can share our experience with others and then have our staff and elected officials also getting information from around the country on best practices, that certainly does benefit the city of Bloomington.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. Council, anything else to add on this?
Mayor, with that being said, I'd like to make a motion.
Councilmember Lohman.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the out-of-state travel expenses for Councilmember Jenna Carter to travel to San Juan, Puerto Rico for the State of Black Health National Conference, September 5th to the 9th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember Mua to accept item 3.12 on our consent business tonight. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And 3.14, the Bloomington Ice Garden Modernization. I believe this was Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, one, I don't disagree with this item. I just want to make sure that the public knew what it was regarding in terms of pre-design for this project. Obviously, for most people that are paying attention, the ice garden is on the ballot this fall, and I know from this seat we can't advocate for or against that, so I want to be mindful of that. So I just wanted to, if maybe the city manager or someone can give information about what this is doing and why we're looking at doing it right now so that people understand that we're not getting the cart before the horse on this issue here.
Mr. Verbrugge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Councilmember Nelson, I'm going to invite our Director of Parks and Recreation, Ann Catry, or is it our Director of Public Works, Carl Keel? I think this might be a jump ball because they're working collaboratively on this one. And even with the bad knee, it looks like Carl's got the. Ann was a pretty darn good basketball player in her time,
but. Mayor and Council, I think this item, this contract is split into two pieces. One is a pre-design work, and the second is the actual design and construction work. Should you approve a project to proceed. The pre-design work is to scope a number of approaches to this project. One approach would be, what would a project look like if it were approved by voters in the referendum this fall? So that would give us an idea of exactly what would be included in that project. As we've talked to you on a number of times, there's parts of BIG that are going to need significant repairs, even if it's not approved by voters this fall. And so the other part of that scoping would be that smaller project to do those things that have to be done regardless of the outcome of this fall's election. And that project would be scoped and would go through the normal process. You would approve that to proceed if you felt it was proper. So that's what this contract is for. If once we finish that pre-design work, the larger portion of this contract would be modified depending on what the approach finally is chosen. Would it be the smaller project or a voter-approved project in the fall?
Councilmember?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that explanation. I just think it's important for people to understand. And the smaller part is all that is going to move forward now, and we're going to wait until after the referendum to determine the final architectural and construction management scope based on the feedback we get directly from residents. It's their choice. So.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure people were clear about that they weren't seeing this as something that we're moving forward with before that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
for the information, Carl, and thank you, Councilmember Nelson. I think that's a good point, and I'm sure folks just kind of coming across this on the agenda might wonder exactly the questions that you brought up. So thanks for bringing it forward and getting clarified. Appreciate it. With that, if you're satisfied, Councilmember Nelson, I'd look for a motion.
Yeah. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Nelson, second by Councilmember Carter to accept item 3.14 on tonight's consent business as stated. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Item 4 on our agenda are our hearings, resolutions, and ordinances. We have one public hearing this evening. This is regarding a change of condition of approval. And we have, from our planning department, Liz O'Day coming forward to lead us through this. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do I need to wait until it's up on? Oh, there we go. All right. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Item 4.1 on your agenda this evening is regarding a change of condition number 7 in a case from 1988, and the property address is 1558 East 80th Street. A little bit of background on the property. A conditional use permit was approved in 1988 for a residential board and lodging facility. It was limited to 24 residents, and no personal vehicles were allowed at that time. City Council at that time added a condition that the use be operated only under a service agreement with Hennepin County. A little bit of background, the property has been vacant since May of 2023, and so the owners have been proactively marketing the property, and they have multiple buyers interested. Here is the language proposed language change. As you can see, we're striking service agreement with Hennepin County and adding license, registration, or agreement for group housing or congregate living facility with a governmental agency. And then the rest of that condition regarding the change in use will remain the same. All other conditions with that case in 1988 will be still in place. This proposed change of condition expands the ability for a buyer to work with other governmental entities such as the state, and it provides a higher level of flexibility to meet housing needs within the marketplace. And it also retains oversight of a governmental license or registration, and staff has not received any correspondence related to this item. Pretty quick presentation for you this evening. We are recommending approval, and I believe the owner representative is in the audience tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. O'Day. Council, any questions on this? Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick questions. Is it required that this be sold as a group or congregate care building?
Mayor and Councilmember Nelson, I believe that the applicant has buyers that are interested in multiple different uses. I think they're kind of waiting to see how this approval pans out, and that might impact potential buyers.
Okay. Would, under what is here, would other uses for it be allowed?
Say that question again.
Would other uses outside of that be allowed under what we're approving, or does it still have to stay with some service agency, or it's locked into that type of facility?
Mayor and Councilmember Nelson. So yeah, this is a conditional use permit that was approved back in 1988. So they still have to comply with the conditional use permit from that time with the conditions. If they are changing use, this is zoned R4, by the way, so all the permitted uses relate to multiple family housing, congregate living, those would be permitted.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, I think, is that if there was a buyer that wanted to do something different than that, they would need to come back and get a conditional use permit, likely, unless it was permitted use for some reason in that zoning. So, okay, I just want to make sure there was flexibility there. Thank you.
Councilmember Mua.
And I just want to make sure that there's no other ties with Hennepin County, that we don't have any other obligation, or the seller has any obligation to Hennepin County, and this wouldn't be an issue from that front.
Mayor, Councilmember, I am not aware of any other kind of ties to Hennepin County. I know that the agreement has ceased with Hennepin County, so I'm not aware of any other kind of ties to that.
Council, additional questions, comments? You said the applicant is here.
I believe so. I don't know what he looks like.
The applicant is
There
here.
you go.
Is there anything you would like to add? Would you like an opportunity to address the council? If so, you've got to come forward. If the answer is more than no, you have to come forward. Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you. All right, no further questions, council? This is a public hearing, and I'm going to open the public hearing now on item 4.1. This is a public hearing regarding the change of condition of approval. Is there anyone in the council chambers who wishes to speak to item 4.1 this evening? Is there anyone online who wishes to speak to item 4.1 or on the phone?
Mayor and council members, no one on the line.
Last call for anyone in the council chambers? Council, no one on the phone, no one coming forward to speak in the chambers. I'd look first for a motion to close the public hearing on item 4.1.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Martin, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to close the public hearing on item 4.1. No further council discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Council, pretty straightforward amendment of this conditional use permit. Any questions or concerns on it at all? If not, I would look for action on item 4.1.
Mayor.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we adopt a resolution amending the conditional use permit condition number 7 in case 5144A88 to remove the reference to a service agreement with Hennepin County and allow operations by a license, registration, or agreement for a group housing or congregate living facility from a government agency.
Motion by Councilmember Martin, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to approve item 4.1 as stated. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on to item 5 on our agenda. This is organizational business, and actually the next 3 items are strictly informational items. There's no action requested on any of these items, so this is as we kind of head into our a study session almost portion of our council meeting this evening. And the first part of our organizational business, item 5.1, this is a discussion regarding our neighborhood traffic management program screening scenarios and the possibility regarding the budget. And I see Ms. Julie Long up in front of us already ready to go. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Council, as we are concluding our neighborhood traffic management program study that we're planning on bringing to you probably in the month of September, we realized we had a few loose ends where we would like some input from you before we finalize our report and have the public hearing. So that's what I'm here for tonight. I want to briefly talk about our screening criteria scenarios and how we're going to, we believe with our new program with removing the petition and the application fee, we're going to get a lot more interest than we have in the past. And how are we going to pick which ones to go forward with? So we wanted to talk a little bit about the screening criteria and then everyone's favorite topic, budgets. So first I want to tell you what the project elements cost and then talk about staff recommendations for the budget, and you can say yay, nay, or you should do this or that or mix it up. So on the proposed screening criteria for the traffic calming element of the program, we want to have criteria that are measurable, that differentiate between the different streets, and that we have available data from. We are looking at 4 different scenarios for the traffic calming program, and we're pretty close on getting those guidelines figured out, but we're also working on school zone prioritization criteria. I won't have a slide for that, but I'll briefly touch on some of the points that we're going to be looking at. So for the traffic calming component of it, we're looking at evaluating 5 criteria. Traffic conditions, which is what we're using for our average daily traffic. So if you're on a road that gets over 1,000 vehicles per day, you would score more points with our criteria than if you lived on a road that had 200 vehicles per day. We wanted to have points for safety and experience. So bikes and pedestrians in the area, do we have off-road facilities for them to use? With regards to equity, we're looking at several different things, not only the non-white population of an area, but also the low-income numbers in the area, the number of vehicles with numbers of households with no vehicles. I said that in backwards. And also limited English proficiency. So we've got points for all of those. We're trying to count the number of community destinations in an area. So if you are connected within a quarter mile to schools, parks, you get more points than if you're further away. And then the last one is the number of people and densities. And as you can see by one of those bell charts in the middle, you know, engineers were trying to get the data to file in a nice bell chart. It doesn't quite work out, but we're getting close. So that's where we're going. And with that scenario, we've given it to our technical review committee to review. Now you're probably going, traffic calming. Hey, Julie, you don't have any speed up there. Aren't we trying to get people to go slower? Isn't that the point? You'll remember I talked about measurable and available data. With our program and our new schedule that we're looking at, we'll be making our determination. The program will be in January. We'll be evaluating in February. One of the ways we count speed data in Minnesota is to put tube counters down. Tube counters in February do not agree with the snowplows. So we may not have data available. We might have data on some of the streets. We might not have any data on the streets. So what we've been discussing with the technical review committee is something we're calling bonus points. So if we have speed data, let's pretend we got 10 applications, and we have speed data for all 10 of the local streets, then we would assign a point value for speeds and include that in the criteria. If we only had speed data for 7 of the streets and 3 of them we didn't, we wouldn't use that at all because it's not equitable to measure. So that's where we're headed with that. With our school zones, I mentioned we don't have a slide, but we're looking at, similar to the criteria, demographics of both the school and the neighborhood on where it resides. The safety experience, the bike ped gaps that we may have. We also want to include like the number of crossings for a pedestrian to get to the school. We've talked about walk distance versus walk zone for the school, and I won't get into the technical details, but that's kind of where we're headed. And again, we're going to want a nice bell curve to help figure it out. So those are the criteria where we're headed. So if you see any faults, would love to hear about those, or what about this criteria? And you can say, oh, crashes, Julie, we really should have crashes. Well, on local streets, crashes are usually 1. They're not like our arterials and collectors where we can have a crash rate per the intersection. We have 1 random crash here in 10 years. We have 1 random crash over there. It doesn't differentiate or tell us the data on a local street like it does on the busier streets. So now moving from scenario selection to budget items, want to talk about the different cost elements of a couple different components of our proposed program. So one of the proposals we'll be making and recommendations to the City Council is that we want to recommend lowering of the speed limit on our local roads from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. As you can imagine, we're going to need some new signs. So you've probably driven in Minneapolis, Edina, St. Louis Park, and as you enter their community, they have 25 mile an hour, unless posted otherwise sign as you enter, and then probably 100 feet away they have 35 mile an hour because you're on a collector or an arterial. And it's a confusing message, but unfortunately that's the best we got at this point in time. So we are looking for a budget to add those signs to Bloomington. We're talking about adding new speed radar signs. We'd like to have 10 of them. We already have 4. We'd like to add 10 more and be able to deploy those to help educate people as the speed limit changes so that they recognize what they should be driving. We've also talked about one of the things we have with speed limits is we don't have currently a school speed zone. So we would like to implement those. We've estimated 20 schools. We may be missing a charter school here or there, but on average, and 2 signs per school zone. And then our last component on the speed limit reduction would be communication and education strategies. So with that, we would be buying some yard signs, some paid social media ads, that sort of thing. Before I get to the next budget slide, I thought this would be helpful information to know that with our existing traffic calming program, our traffic calming coordinator is a part-time position, and with our existing staff and equipment, it allows 3 trials maximum per summer, whether it's initiated by the public or by staff. So the consultant looked at the program and said, hey, Bloomington, you're the 4th largest city in the state of Minnesota, and we really think you should be doing 8 temporary trials in a summer. Well, that's great, but we don't have staff for that. So you'll see that this proposal includes a full-time employee, the additional tube counters to do all the counts, the traffic calming devices, the temporary ones that we deploy to collect our data, and a vehicle. Then they also continued with, of those 8, we think 5 will probably move forward to actual construction. So you can see over on the bottom right-hand side, various costs for the different treatments. So speed humps, tables, they're about $10,000 a piece. The neighborhood traffic circle, which we've installed plenty of, we've seen those are also about $10,000, and it gets more expensive as you go down the list. This last one is a lighting program. You're probably like, why is this here? And that's kind of what I thought when we did our engagement with the public. We got a lot of people who said, we'd like to talk about streetlights, because we had communicated that our neighborhood traffic management program included a livability component to the public. And so a lot of them are like, well, streetlights is part of the livability of my community. It may not have anything to do with speeds, but I'm interested in that. And they said the people who knew about it were like, oh, the program works fine. We just can't find it to begin with. So, as you know, one of our goals is with this program is to have a one-stop shop. So it's going to include lighting. The lighting cost, Excel traditionally doesn't charge us for the pole. They just charge us for the operating cost of the pole. It's about $23 a year. And so that's why you see the lighting budget cost. So, on the different traffic calming options, you probably remember an earlier presentation from Kimberly Horn, and we talked about 2 different tiers in our toolbox. The tier 1s I call are less invasive in the neighborhood as far as construction goes. Installing a speed hump, installing a traffic circle, they're way less invasive than what I call our pavement management program streets. So that's what we've included in tier 1. The tier 2 ones are the diverters, the chicanes, the chokers. They involve a lot more curb work, likely some utility catch basin work. So I want to only propose those when we're actually already have another project, just because the expense is going to be too high to do them independently, in our opinion. So I have a couple different options regarding the permanent treatments. On the tier 1s, we could add the $50,000 to the general fund budget. We could come to you as the council and say, request special priority money for each one that moves forward. When we were here earlier, we talked about assessments. The current program is assessing 100% of the costs. We heard feedback from one council member who said, I'd be interested in exploring 25% assessment. So that's up there as an option. And then one of the things we wanted to talk about was a grant program. So in keeping with the equity component, that if we have a census block group that is less than the median household income, which is $80,582 based on the time of the report, so that probably will change from year to year, or if there's a percentage of the population in that census block that's below poverty level of greater than 8%, that the city would pick up those costs and not do the assessment. Similarly, on tier 2, the funding could come either from the PMP reconstruction or PMP overlay CIP funds, which is how we fund the staff-generated traffic calming items today. So I think we could incorporate that into the program. Or we could also do the assessment 100% and 25% like I discussed above. So that's all fine and dandy. What are my actual recommendations to you as a council? My actual recommendations on these one-time costs with plan adoption for both the signs and the communication and education is about $22,500. I've talked to my friends in Public Works Maintenance. They have some budget 4 signs already that they are not going to be spending, so we could reallocate that money for the one-time cost. And depending on, my ultimate goal is to marry both the local speed limit changes and the collector arterials all at once so we don't confuse the public. So we may have to do a carryover, but Kari's assured me that that will not be hard to do. This next slide is what would be the annual costs of the program as we move forward. So I have phased things in because I'm fairly conservative cost-wise. You may be like, oh, Julie, that's a poor plan. Let's just bite the bullet and get it all done at once. Or you might be like, oh my gosh, have you seen our tax levy? We can't go that way. We're going to have to phase it in over more time. So the speed radar signs, I'm proposing that we buy 2 of those a year for the next 5 years. The school flasher assemblies, we're proposing 4 of the signs, so it would be half of that would be the number of schools we would impact. And we're phasing that in with either 1 school on a collector street or 2 schools on residential streets, just because based on the current staff we have, we can't do all 20 schools at once. If you want to do all 20 schools at once, that number will increase, and we'll also be hiring a consultant to get that work done. So this is how to phase it in over time. Anytime you put something up in the right of way, someone has a chance of knocking it down or it's going to fade, so I've got some maintenance costs in there. Whoops. And then the permanent traffic calming. I will only included the tier 1 costs in there. I'm proposing that we continue using the pavement management program to fund the tier 2 ones. So this would be 5 elements in a construction year. So the total would be an additional $77,250 per year. You'll notice I didn't mention about adding any staff. Council, we've had 3 people who have applied in the time the program's been existing. I can't in good faith come up here and say, we need a new staff person to manage this, because I don't know what we're dealing with. So what I'm proposing is this first year, we adopt the plan, we take applications. In February, we might get 10 applications, we might get 50. We'll use our screening criteria to come down, we'll do the 3 analysis. The following year, we'll see how many people are still with us in 2025 of February. And then if we're continue to see a large group, I'll be like coming back forward and saying, Council, we're not meeting the needs of our community and we should increase this budget, and I'd like you to consider it at that time. But I don't think it's appropriate to ask for that at this point. So now I want to hear from you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. I think we'll probably have some questions and comments.
Excellent.
Councilmember Carter.
Well, thank you, Julie. This is an exciting presentation, and I do have several questions, but I'll try to be concise. So some is kind of really more detailed. I'm just curious how you got to 50 signs, because I think about like all the residential streets, and I think I made the point in our last conversation, like I don't even know how many people actually know the speed limit on the residential streets in Bloomington, because there really aren't that many signs. And so I'm just curious how you got to 50. And then I'm also curious, because it seems like the cost associated with the signs, the biggest cost is the pole and probably installation of the pole. And maybe this is silly, but I mean, are we allowed to put speed limit signs on the light poles? Like, because those are all over in the neighborhoods. And maybe I'll let you talk more about the strategy there.
All right. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, the consultant came up with 50. I think what you're noticing and what you're saying out loud is the reason people don't know what the speed limit is because we don't have a lot of speed limit signs on our local roads, so there isn't a lot of expense to replace those. Like if I told you there were 350 miles of streets, you're like, that's a lot of streets. You'd think we'd have more signs, but we actually don't have that many signs. So I think that's why you're seeing the lower cost. And as far as the poles, we can partner the speed limit signs with different signs. So if there's already a signpost out there, we can mount it on there. And we can also strap them onto light poles depending on what type of light pole it is.
Okay, all right,
So we've got flexibility.
Okay, that's helpful. So yes to school speed zones and yes to reducing speeds in neighborhoods. To the budget, so in both tier 1 and tier 2, you recommended a grant program?
If we went with the assessment portion of it. So if you, as council said, no, we just want to put it in the general fund budget, then we don't need a grant program. But if you said, we want the neighborhood to have some skin in the game to make sure that they really want to participate this, and we want to set the assessment at either 100% or at 25% of the cost of the project, then we're asking for a grant program for streets that would fall in that poverty rate so that they could still participate in it and it wouldn't cause an adverse financial burden to them.
Okay.
Because I have experience with the pavement management program, I hear a lot of heartbreaking stories with that, and I would like to hear less heartbreaking stories.
Yeah, totally agree. So it sounds like the budget that the proposal you're putting forward is more around operationalizing the program, but then later on, there will be costs associated with the projects themselves and how we pay for the projects, which might include the grant funding. But I do agree. I think I really like the idea, so I appreciated you putting it in the proposal. But again, we'll hear more about those, I assume, at a later date then, when we have to make those kinds of decisions.
Yes.
Okay. And then last question. So I do like your phased approach, especially given where we're at with our budget, at least preliminary, what I'm hearing preliminarily. But I'm wondering if there's a chance to get state funding. So I know that the state allocated a bunch of money this last legislative session for active transportation and have the active transportation, the safe routes to school funding at the state level. And so would this project be eligible for some of those funds? And if we were able to get those, could we use our funds then to maybe accelerate some of the strategies?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, as the federal government and the state look at more of rolling out their programs, more details come, we become aware of them every day. But at this time, there isn't a grant program that we could apply for these signs. That doesn't mean that tomorrow we're not going to get an email that says this would be perfect and it would be completely eligible. So we will continue to watch for that. We will continue to apply. But I can't say if we're going to be eligible for them.
Okay, so if we did like the school zones and wanted to buy the equipment for the school areas, that maybe would be, like we could maybe apply for safe routes for that, potentially?
Potentially.
Okay, all right. I will stop asking questions, thank you.
Thank you. I just would like to follow up on the whole school. I see that the school zone flasher assembly. Are we talking about officially instituting a school speed zone part of our ordinance to intentionally bring the speed limit down, especially during the school day, school hours or so on, above and beyond the 25 mile per hour reduction citywide? Can you clarify that for me?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, what we're proposing is to look at them on a case-by-case basis, and we would propose a speed limit more like 20 miles an hour. Now, that depends on the type of road that we're doing it on. It requires the different, I've lost my train of thought. Well, I'm going to go make another point for you. The speed limit zone signs that I'm talking about is the ones that are in our estimate are very specific. You can see that I've put all the little qualifiers. It's a solar sign. It is a static sign with no feedback on it. And what that means to the average person who doesn't speak engineering is we could either hardwire it or we could use a solar panel. We've had really good luck with our solar panels on our traffic signs, so we're not worried about using the solar panel. It goes to our sustainability. We love that. We said it was a static sign versus an LED enhanced sign. You've probably seen some signs that have some additional LED lights to bring attention to it. We're not proposing that. And the speed feedback sign is a bit like the radar sign. So it would flash and tell you that you're going 20 miles an hour or you're going 27 miles an hour when you're supposed to be going 20. So what we're proposing is the solar static sign with no feedback. As you can imagine, every time you add a little enhancement to it, that sign gets more expensive. But we do think it's very important that the flasher come with that sign, because we found if it's a static sign, people drive by it, it's August. Depending on where you live, school probably hasn't started, and I know it hasn't started for Bloomington. But I have friends who have school children who have gone back to school. But you don't know, and I don't have children, so I don't know when school starts. So this way the flasher only goes on when school's actually in session to draw attention to that sign, as opposed to just fading into the background. And here comes Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts
Clearly said something incorrect.
Mr. Mayor and council members, just to add to what Julie said on the school zones. So we've come out of the pandemic. We've always had a really good working relationship with the Bloomington School District and staff, and it's a wonderful thing. The pandemic changed a whole lot of things about the way the schools do business. They're recovering, they're getting back to normal, and what that new normal is, we're not quite sure. And so what we need to do is work with each school on an individual basis to see what do they need to make their transportation program successful. That takes time. That takes time on their behalf and time on the city's behalf. And so we can't do that all at once. And so what we're looking at is prioritizing, and that's the scheme that Julia talked about earlier, about how do we prioritize which schools we engage first. And that'll give us a chance to go to them and talk to them about what their needs are. It might be that some of these schools, they're wonderful, they're tucked into smaller neighborhoods. They really don't need a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Yet we've got some schools such as Oak Grove where they're on essentially a collector street, 106th Street or 102nd Street, for example, where that school zone could benefit them. But it won't be the only thing they need. And so what we need is time to sit down with the staff at those districts and the district as a whole and really talk through that on an individual basis. And then so the allocation here is that as we do that, we'll have money to go ahead and implement those changes, set up those 20-mile-an-hour school zones where it applies, but also look at their bigger transportation needs and see how we can partner with them.
And I appreciate that, and I would expect nothing less, Kirk, in the work that you do, that the thoughtful, the measured approach to it, and make sure you're doing what should happen and do it right, and I appreciate that. What I want to make sure is that if we're digging into this, and if we really are going to get after this, that especially in our school zones, even around parks, we've talked about around parks or the crossings to get to a park, that we have something in place that not only reduces speeds or indicates things, but of the ease that I keep talking about. One of them, of course, is also enforcement. And I would personally like to see that we have it written somewhere that in a school zone in front of a park, I mean, if we've got it down to the 20 miles an hour, that the enforcement, I don't know if, I think you can up fines in school zones. I don't know that for certain, but I think you can have even more significant fine in a school zone or in a park zone or by a nursing home, that type of thing. And I would like to make sure that we examine all of that in terms of, especially around our schools and parks, that we examine every possibility using all the different E's, the environment, the education, the engineering, and the enforcement to make sure that we send the message that that's just not acceptable in Bloomington. So, Councilmember D'Alessandro and then Councilmember Lohman. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great presentation. I actually got some questions from a resident earlier today and was able to say, hey, tune in, because it's going to be on the ballot, like the thing today. It's going to be great. So thank you for that. I want to just make sure we recap very quickly the kind of neighborhood initiated program, just a clarification. So we talked before about not necessarily requiring an application fee or anything more. You'll go through the process in January. People will bring you ideas, and we'll go through the assessment process there. That's when there's this open question for you all about whether or not we should plan to accept 8, whatever it is, right, program adjustments per year, and whether or not we should just incorporate that into the budget, or whether or not we should consider assessment to that community, right? That's one of the open questions here. Okay, just want to make sure I recap that. So I think I agree in the same way that we have in the past asked for resident initiated changes to be assessed to the properties if enough of them get together and say that it's okay. Louisiana Avenue being the most recent one, right, for example. I think that that's a great idea, but I really do appreciate, number one, that we could consider a 25-75 proposal, which just makes it more equitable in general and more likely that it would happen, because people won't be as unwilling to go there because of the cost potentially. And then also, in addition to that, that we incorporate the grant program. I think it's a wonderful way to ensure that we have the ability to keep our kids safe across the city, regardless of where they happen to live, and what they're trying to get to. So, from my perspective, I just wanted to make the comments is that if you're asking for feedback on that, I think it's going to be great for us to consider a 25-75. I mean, if it's a $10,000 a piece or whatever, maybe 75-25 is irrelevant because it comes out to like $52 over 10 years. I don't know. Like maybe that doesn't make a difference, right? But if it is a significant assessment, in the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, it might make sense for us to do that program, in which case I would be very much for the grant program. And I really thank you for being innovative about bringing that to the table. Thanks.
Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a lot of what you had to say there. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to start. I was going to start with the criteria, but I just I keep thinking about economies of scale. I know earlier, Mayor, you were talking about the school flasher piece and flasher light piece. Well, it didn't come out the right way. A little slip of the tongue there. I'm a little tired. I did an all-nighter last night, so work project due. So I think about economies of scale, and I remember that past council at one point had taken some of the park equipment and paid for that we had bonded for that, paid for all of that over a period of time. I know we did it kind of in a succession, so I'm wondering, as I look at this program, is there any way to take advantage of that economy of scale? So that's one thought. The other thought that I had was around we have a home loan program, one either redistributing those funds. I know this is a budget thing and really not germane to what we're talking about here, but I wonder if there's some concepts that could be adopted from that. And I don't know what they are, but I wonder if there's something we could pull from that rather than this, 25, 75%. And the reason why I think about, I ask myself the question, why are we attempting to do this? And when we're trying to reduce speed limits, it's one of the goals, one of the conferences we've gone to is this idea of trying to drive down death on our roads. And so really it's a public health kind of situation that we're trying to do there. And so I asked myself the question, if, as a policymaker, if we were willing to pay or to bond down some of the park equipment that our kids play on, why not the routes that allow us, those kids, to safely get there as well? Maybe some of these other ones might make some sense with that piece there. So that's just something. I'm not sure there's really a question there, but just a musing of me. Maybe it's because I was up super late. And then I'll go to the criteria piece. I love that. I like these here, but I'm just wondering about, in terms of, from an environmental perspective, I know it's there, but is it a separate criteria? And then as we look at not just affordability, but as we do these things or invest in these things, and I know that we typically get the best things around there, I'm always questioning myself in terms of the resilience of the product that we buy, that it becomes affordable over a long period of time. So I don't know if those fit into criteria, or maybe they're covered somewhere else, but I wanted to at least ask those questions. And I guess that also would apply also to health. What's the health and the welfare of our residents as we look at this? So,
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lohman, we don't have a criteria for environment. So if you have something more specific that could help us narrow it down, like I would like to see, something specific that would help us a lot with our criteria?
I tell you what, we'll take it offline.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to, do that. Too
Yeah, I
tired
couldn't
tonight.
come up with a great idea off the
Yeah,
top of my
but
head
maybe
either.
my colleague might have some thoughts.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yeah, just some ideas there. Certainly, if we're using rubber for some of the barriers and such, that they're recycled rubber. Signage. Oftentimes, signage can be reused. So if that's something that we can do, I also love the idea of incorporating, if we are going to do traffic circles or other things like that, that we automatically just assume that we're planting native species into the areas where they're growing. So there's just lots of things that we can consider as part of that to just kind of keep those sustainability efforts. But there's permeable and semi-permeable surfaces out there that I think could work in a lot of cases that we haven't really considered as well, and that just helps us with stormwater and drainage and that kind of thing too. So we've got some ideas we could throw at you. I'll send you some links I know of. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, council member, I understand where you're headed, but now I'm a little confused based on Councilmember Lohman's question, because I thought his question was related to the selection of the project criteria and using environment as part of the selection of the streets for traffic calming, not for the implementation. So I understand how to do implementation with more environmentally friendly practices. What I didn't understand was the selection, like how do I pick Stevens Avenue versus 103rd, and how to judge those from an environmental aspect. So that's where I got
a little different
confused.
question and a little different point. I think you answered the one a good implementation question, but I think the measurement question and the
So let me give a.
well, and if you could take it offline,
that would be
suggest
better.
let's-
That would be better. Yeah, thank you.
do that.
Thanks for
I apologize, Mr. Mayor.
What I said earlier. Yeah.
Yep.
I apologize. I did have one other quick thing that came to mind as Councilmember Lohman was talking. Would the program that we're putting in place for resident initiated things include like smaller things, like, hey, I would really like a stop sign at my 4-way intersection? Like, can that be included in there too? Are those ideas going to be considered? As I don't see anything on here that defines like what the cost might be for somebody if they wanted to put in 4-way signs or something.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, I think that would be a great element to include in what I've been calling our one-stop shop for our traffic program. However, that is not really a traffic calming measure, and often with stop signs, there are rules you have to meet and criteria, and we don't just install them willy-nilly. We had a resident request, we install 4 yield signs in an intersection. I'm like, that doesn't help anyone. Nobody knows who to go. Like, so we need to put the yield signs on the minor streets and leave the major streets as the through movement. So there's a lot of misconceptions. People have forgotten what they learned in driver's ed because it was so many years ago. So they think stop signs are going to solve all the problems. Stop signs often don't solve the problem they're looking to solve and often create unintended consequences. But that doesn't mean that if they have a stop sign problem where they think that that is the solution, they shouldn't be looking at our traffic calming program, because there is probably an element of what they're trying to solve there. It's just that's not the right measure to solve it.
Right, understood. So the criteria that, or the ask, if you will, of the resident or neighborhood group isn't so much to like, hey, here's the solution I want you to implement. It's more like, hey, we know we have a traffic calming need here. Come out and assess with us, and we'll figure it out together.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So just for clarification for people and for me, the neighborhood program would be neighborhood initiated. It's not the city going in and saying, you guys need a roundabout. It's the neighborhood going, hey, we have an issue, we have a concern. Can we get your professionalism and help us address this? Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, yes. We have already, as staff, as part of our annual pavement management program, we have both a look-ahead meeting and where we talk with the streets, or talk with traffic staff. Then we do our neighborhood engagement for those streets that are coming up in like 2 years, to see what kind of traffic issues they're having. So if they're already, or if we're aware of one, we already have a mechanism to go forward with this. These are more the livability ones, or ones that we're like, well, you're not on the PMP, so we're not gonna get to you for like another 15 years. if you have small children, like if you have a 2-year-old, you really don't want to wait until they're in high school for the city to come and solve your problem.
At that point, they will be the problem. So, so just saying. I live by a high school. In terms of criteria, you had mentioned equity, and I would just encourage you to include, to the extent that you can get the data, if there's people with limited mobility in the area, seniors in an area that's predominantly with young children, the types of people that would be probably least able to protect themselves from traffic concerns, and make sure we're taking a look at that from the equity perspective. You had talked about the speed data, and if you had all 10, you'd use speed data as a bonus factor, but if you didn't have all 10, you wouldn't. I guess the question in my mind is, why not? If you had speed data that showed one street was just way off the charts, that, you know, people were traditionally just going excessively fast on that, I bring that up because I live by a high school, you know, and high school drivers tend to be overly optimistic in their abilities to drive. I also see it in other places. I drive through Councilmember Lohman's district on 106th, and this year alone I've been passed 4 times in the center lane. My daughter tells me I drive like a grandpa, but there are places that people are driving excessively fast that I guess I just don't understand why you wouldn't use that data if it showed something excessive.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, that's something to consider if you're open to us only picking and choosing where we use certain data. We could do that. The one caveat I would also share is we do have a program, it's called Streetlight, where we can generate traffic data from there, and it includes some speed data. But if the road is close to a freeway, it sometimes gives you really wrong answers. So the Ensign area is up for the pavement management program in a couple years. Like I mentioned, we had our look ahead meeting. The traffic staff says, oh, we don't get any calls about speeding on there. Streetlight says that they've got a huge speeding problem. It's 55 miles an hour on that roadway because it's right immediate adjacent to the 494 169 ramp. So the data isn't always this fine point. So sometimes I just want to throw out the data because I know that it's wrong. But if you're open to using parts of the data, even if we don't have data for other streets, my hang up is if I don't have data for Clinton, but I have data for Chicago, and I give Clinton the points and I don't give Chicago the data, I feel a little bad about that. But if you're okay with it, it's going to be your program that you adopt, so.
Yeah. And I candidly would rely on your professional expertise. If the data doesn't seem like it's good or valid, obviously I would expect you wouldn't use it. And I'm just saying, if there was a big outlier, I think that would be information to bring forward, especially if it's just bonus points. It's not the main criteria. It's kind of a bonus thing. It would be good information to have as maybe a tiebreaker. School zones, one, obviously that's one of the biggest things I get from people, and making sure we're safe around school. So that makes a lot of sense. The question I have is, if we're going to phase that, how would we possibly prioritize? I mean, I hear a lot about 102nd. We tragically had a fatal accident at 102nd in France. You know, we talked about, you talked about Olson off of 106 there. You know, have some of these schools that are on larger ones. So I think that's a basic criteria. But we have several that are in that situation. And Washburn off 84th. And, you know, how would we prioritize those? And to maybe Councilmember Lohman's point, you know, could we put those into groups and do more of them at once? Because this is, in my mind, one of the biggest concerns I hear about from people.
Good point. Councilmember Moore? Oh, do you have more?
I always have more, yeah. I actually do.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Or did you want to chime in on the school issue? Can we do that quickly, Councilmember? Is that okay if Councilmember Moore jumps in on the school issue? Please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Nelson. My biggest concern is the school issue as well, especially the phasing. My oldest is 4, and if we wait 15 years, he's going to be out of the house, right? And so I am particularly interested in making sure that we can figure out how to make it faster. whether it's partnering with the school district or whatever, some other way to figure out how we can work with these schools to understand their needs, but implement faster, because I think 10 to 15 years is too long.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mua, Councilmember Nelson, I have a off-the-cuff proposal. We'll see how it flies. On most everything I've been talking about on our neighborhood traffic management plan, it's all on local streets. But admittedly, we have schools that are not on our local streets. They're on our collectors and arterials. What if we bundled all of those? If you are not on a local street, we accelerated those, and council was willing to hire a consultant to help us fund that, to work with the school district to get those done faster. And then we use the criteria just for our local street schools.
I think that makes good sense to look at different situations in different ways. I think as Kirk was mentioning earlier, you look at different situations in different ways. I think that makes good sense. And I'll also throw an off-the-cuff idea at this. I think council, we have, every year we talk about strategic priorities, and if we think this might be a 1 or 2 time strategic priority investment, that might be something we would want to consider investing in. And this is going to blow the top off of some people's heads, but I think if we would up enforcement, perhaps some of the extra fine revenue could also go to the program to help fund it in a variety of different ways. So, Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. To your point with regards to the collector and arterial streets, I know when we originally talked about this, it was something that I had brought up to not just limit this to local streets, because the biggest concerns I hear are not necessarily on the street I live on or the street that many of us live on, but it's the high speed of traffic on our major roads. And so will we be looking at that and looking at ideas? Because one of the things you were talking about, the flashing signs, and I see those used in other communities to let people know their speed, and does it have an impact on slowing people down when they know that they're going over the speed limit? It's on a big sign flashing at them. We're saying it works by schools. Would it work on Old Shakopee or something, or Normandale or something of that nature? So I'm just wondering if that'll be part of it. The other part along those lines is we used to have some signs, and I know there are reasons we got rid of them, but is it worth consideration of, local traffic only type of signs? I happen to, in District 2, have warehouses where there's large vehicles that use local streets. And so we've got semi-trucks driving down, fairly local streets. There's probably collector or arterial, or they're a little bit larger, but they're certainly not what the people living on those streets would expect to be driving down their street on a regular basis. Is there a way to say no large trucks or something like that? And then I think the other thing I hear about is just parking and parking restrictions, and how flexible they can be. I know near Jefferson they have them so that they're only during the school year and school hours that you're actually, apologize, not Jefferson, it's by Olson, that those signs are out. So you can't park on the south side of that, which is a local street. So anyways, are we going to broaden this at all and talk about some of those other issues that I hear about in terms of traffic?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, probably not. And I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why. The streets you named, Normandale, Old Shakopee, those are all county roads. The county does not have authorization to change their speed limits on those roads. Unlike cities, they have not been given that permission from the state legislature. So they will not be changing the speed limits on those roadways. We also want to make sure that there is a benefit to the driving public to drive on those collectors and arterials instead of cutting through the arterial streets. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't going to be proposing to do some different speed limit changes, and we might need one of my favorite E's, the engineering. So Kirk is working on speed limits for our collectors and arterials that are non-county roadways. So Highwood is a good example. We have data that shows people speed on Highwood, and I can go change that sign tomorrow if you tell me that I can, and it won't make any difference until we do the engineering and we build some chokers and we maybe put a chicane in there or do something. then that's just wishful engineering at that point, and I don't think we're going to be successful at that. I want people to look at our sign and it says 25 miles or 35 miles an hour and know that that is the speed that they should be going. And I want the environment that they're driving through or walking through to enforce that idea as they're moving through that area. So I think we are going to be moving forward with, and Kirk's going to be bringing the collector and arterial speed limit changes to you, but we're going to have proposals where we're going to change speed limits or recommend changing speed limits, and we're going to have some streets that we're going to say, until we actually build something different, we can put as many signs up as you want, and you can have a full-time police officer out there doing enforcement, and it won't affect permanent change, because as soon as that officer leaves, people are going to go back to their old habits because that's what the design tells them to do.
Councilmember Nelson, and let's.
Sorry,
I'll be quick here.
Let's.
I just want to
we're at
clarify
9
that I
o'clock
was
already.
not
We've still got 2 meaty items that we've got to get through as well.
I was not at all suggesting changing the speed limits on those roads. I was suggesting ways to better inform people of the speed limits on those roads and encourage them. Like the example I gave was the flashing signs. Can we put those types of things up so that people know if they work near school zones, if people pay attention, see that they're speeding and they slow down in one area, why wouldn't work in another area? I was not suggesting that we change speed limits, but I was suggesting more signage on some of our roads that we can to divert traffic over there. And the last thing I would say is I actually am not that much in support of changing the local speed limit to 25 for the point you just made. I don't see what change it's going to make. And as you noted earlier, there's an accident here, there's an accident there. In my mind, that really isn't the problem. It's not enforceable. You know, before I moved on anything like that, I'd love to hear from the police, but you know, I don't see them pulling people over for going 33 in a, you know, local street. I don't think they're going to pull people over for going 28 in a local street. I just don't think it's going to really make any impact unless I saw some more data on that. To your point, it's about the design, it's about the information that we're giving to people, and so that was my suggestion on those larger streets, is to give more information on those streets similar to what we're talking about. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Mua and then Councilmember Martin, excuse me. Councilmember Mua. Oh, you had the question answered already? Councilmember Martin?
Thank you very much. Just one quick thought and a question. I appreciate that you included in the potential budget amounts here, kind of determining, depends on what we do with landscaping for the curb extensions and the circles and things like that. I guess I would suggest leaning into landscaping hard and potentially over budgeting for it, because I think really using these new features, not just as a punitive, now you got to slow down and swerve around the circle a little bit, but saying this is going to be a beautiful addition to the neighborhood. It's going to increase greenery. I think about when I think it was on Portland and Richfield, when they added all those bump outs, everything, and really leaned into saying we are going to make this something we can brag about. It looked like an entirely different neighborhood. So I think moving forward, using it as a spotlight opportunity. And I also appreciate that the amount of measurement and saying it's going to take a little time to be able to put out, say, the tube tests and really see where the hot spots are. With the massive projects that are happening now and are going to be ramping up on 494, potential diversion traffic off the highway at the time we might be doing a lot of these tests, do we have an idea if that's going to scramble our data at all, or if not something to worry about?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Martin, it would depend on what the location is, on whether we think we're going to get skewed data. The MnDOT project has a fairly robust traffic model, so we can probably look to see if we think we're going to get skewed data, but we don't know that. And then Councilmember Nelson, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to that point, I might also, again, briefly apologies, just we have a lot of roads, to your point, that are similarly situated to say you can change the speed limit, it's not going to necessarily do anything. So on a road like that where we know it's going to need to take physical changes to slow people down, we know there's a lot of other roads very similar, in similar positioning. To your point, we're going through, we're doing a point system. So even just saying down the line as policy, we've said we have too many 4-lane roads. We're transitioning a lot of those to 3. Just saying we've got a lot of roads like these that need changes, let's just plan on changing them, as opposed to waiting until data comes in to tell us probably what we already know we're going to find. So anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I want to stress, and we've got to move on here, but I do want to stress, we have been talking about this in terms of, I mean, I use the 5 E's just because it's cute, but it's not in simply enforcement. It's not simply lowering it to 25 miles an hour. It's not simply education. It's not simply doing bump outs and roundabouts. It's all these things together. And figuring out what the best option would be to meet the goal, when the ultimate goal is to slow people down on our city streets. And we've got to figure out a way to do that. Because we have said it, we have all said it, it's the most common thing we hear from people. And so we need all those tools in our tool chest. And it isn't simply putting up 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs. We know that. It's a matter of doing other things as well to make this all work and to slow people down on our streets. So, very quickly, Councilmember Lohman.
Just more of a procedural thing. I saw an email come across here, and I think, one of the things we used to have before in the past is study sessions. And this is more of a study session piece. And I think sometimes when residents watch this going on here, they don't understand that we're studying these issues, and we haven't necessarily taken a position. So just for this one emailer that called in, please take it in that vein, that's how we're looking at this. We're studying it, looking at it, what may be or may not be.
We're in the sausage making business right now, and this is, which we typically did for years on the second floor in another corner of the building. Now we're doing it out on camera and in the council chambers, and I think you're right, Councilmember Lohman. Some people watch it and aren't quite exactly sure what we're doing. This is how we get to the consensus. This is how we get to the final decisions that we make, that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth, and staff bringing great recommendations, council reacting to it, going back and forth, and it's how it works. So that's a good point. So, all right. Thank you. Do you have enough to work with there, do you think?
I think so.
Okay, good. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5.2 on our agenda is another study session type of agenda item. This is our municipal solar project recommendations. And we have Emma Struss, our sustainability coordinator, and Stephanie Allen, our former sustainability commissioner, and Owen Loken, our youth member of our sustainability commission. Welcome to all of you. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. We're here tonight to talk about municipal solar. I'm Emma Struss. I'm the city's sustainability coordinator, and as the mayor just mentioned, I'm joined tonight by 2 of our sustainability commissioners. One, I should say former, she just ended her service, but Stephanie helped lead the initiative this year to have the commission come up with recommendations, which will be shared tonight around the city moving forward with solar, which we were greatly impressed by Stephanie's expertise, given that she works in the solar industry. So the agenda for tonight, I'll provide some quick background about how we got here, and then I'll pass it over to Stephanie to walk through the Sustainability Commission's recommendation, and then she'll pass it back to me to talk about the proposal for solar on public works, and then we'll discuss the proposed next steps. So the background for this, earlier this summer I was given a folder that had sustainability on it, and it had a printed out email from about 20 years ago that said, solar? Public works, should we look into this? So the history goes way back beyond 5 years ago, which is on the slide, but it's been something that's been in discussion. Back in 2018, the city adopted the Bloomington's Energy Action Plan, which set goals around energy efficiency and renewable energy and reducing greenhouse gas emissions in that sector. In 2019, the city completed a study using Apex to look at energy efficiency opportunities for city facilities and then also solar opportunities. Those energy efficiency opportunities were completed between 2020 and 2021. Last year, Public Works got a new roof and it was built to be solar ready. And this year, in the council-approved work plan for the Sustainability Commission, was to have the commission evaluate solar opportunities for city facilities. So with that, I will pass it off to Stephanie to walk through the recommendations.
Right. We're excited to share our recommendations here. It's a high-level list, so it won't be too lengthy here. Our first recommendation is that the project demonstrates an economic benefit to the city. So we want to show this isn't just for sustainability only. It also has financial benefit to the city, and the upfront investment that the city makes must lead to long-term savings. This is achievable many different ways, so I thought it would be important to include in our recommendation. The cost savings should also be dedicated to the city's climate change mitigation investments. We put some examples up on the screen. This hasn't been defined yet, but if we could keep those savings and push them towards some of the city's goals, climate goals, that would be important. Our second recommendation is that the RECs, which are renewable energy certificates, are owned by the city. So those would contribute towards the city's renewable electricity use and carbon footprint reduction goals, and would be a positive step in showing the city's commitment towards reducing their own footprint. Our third recommendation is that the project be located on a flat-roofed city facility that is solar ready. So Emma already mentioned the rooftop on the Public Works building was redone last year and is solar ready, but what that means is that it's able to support a solar array without needing structural modifications. So we won't need to do anything to the building before putting solar on top of it. It also should be on a building where the roof is not anticipated to need replacement in the near future. You don't want to install solar and then need to take it right off to replace the roof underneath it. And then the third item is that you want to install it on a roof that has open space, not obstructed or shaded by any type of mechanical units, trees, other buildings. You want your solar energy to produce energy. And our fourth recommendation is that it is accessible by city facilities and maintenance staff. That access would support employee training and basic maintenance of the solar array. And there would also be energy production monitoring to inform staff of the status of the solar array. So if they saw any dip in production, they would have easy access to go up there and assess if there was just a basic maintenance item that needed to be addressed. Our last recommendation is that the project be completed no later than the end of 2024. A couple items that were added to the end of the recommendation. These items are excluded from the recommendation. Public access to the project is excluded. So although it's not recommended that the public have ready access to the project for safety reasons, educational information and project updates should be shared. And then the last exclusion is subscription options for community members, like a community solar garden. There are already community solar garden options in the area, and for this first city project, adding that complexity to the project is not recommended.
Thank you, Stephanie. So what has already been mentioned is that there essentially is a clear opportunity across the street for us to have a location that aligns with many of the recommendations that the commission has come up with. So at Public Works, we have a recently replaced roof. It's solar ready, it's flat. You can see that there isn't shade, and maintenance staff are housed in that building, so it's easy for them to be able to go and check on it, especially as a learning opportunity. Stephanie also mentioned that there needs to be a financial benefit, and I thought that this would help display that here we're looking at Public Works data from the past 5 years, and you can see that since we made energy efficiency improvements, it isn't weather normalized, but you could see the general trend is that we're using less energy. I'm going to switch now. So we're looking at kilowatt hours here. This next one, if I can get the clicker to work, we're looking at cost. So you can see that this past year, even though we've been using less electricity at Public Works, we now are paying more. And that's something that's a trend that we're going to be seeing energy prices rise. And this gives us an opportunity to be able to lock in at a lower rate to power that building with electricity. financing opportunities, this is a good time to do a project. So we have formula funding in terms of a voucher that we need to apply for before the end of January 2024. It's $150,000 that needs to go towards equipment that a project like a solar solar array would fall into that. Also, starting this year, we now have a federal tax credit. So the investment tax credit now allows cities to be able to have a direct payment option from the IRS for solar. So in the past, you may have realized that we haven't been able to benefit from that, but now there's a clear opportunity for us as long as we meet labor laws and have the requirements of, I think we have to have 15% of the hours be for certain workers and learning in the field. But if we meet those requirements, we can get at least 30% off the project. And then if we decide to go for additional requirements of steel being made in the U.S. and other U.S. manufactured products that go into the arrays, we can get an additional 10%. So in summary, there's new opportunities for us to be able to finance this that weren't happening a year ago. And then we also have grants coming online, like the EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So there's a lot of funding that will be able to apply to starting in Q1 of next year that is competitive, but it's about $4.6 billion that once Met Council does the regional climate planning effort for us, we're going to be able to go after those funds, and that would be covering a project like this. So there's opportunities in the next year to go after financing to be able to take that price down. The last time we got a rough bid for a project like this was in 2019. You'll see that it was $1.2 million. That is a very outdated figure, but that's the most recent one that we have, which is why staff are recommending that we move forward with an RFP, which would allow us to get an updated bid and sense of what we could actually do on public works, how much it would cost, what the payback would be, and the solar production estimate, so that we could come forward to council with more concrete numbers to make a decision. Next steps also including deciding what to do with those renewable energy certificates. The commission recommended to keep them. Those are essentially the way to say, give you credit for the carbon reduction that you have. So if we didn't keep those, essentially we would have solar on our roof, but we couldn't say that we were powering a building with renewable energy. That would go to someone else, which we would have a financial benefit for, but then we wouldn't have that aligned with carbon reduction. So that is a decision that ultimately council will have to make. Our proposal that staff has is to, in the RFP, put in both options so that you can see what path would look like what in terms of financial cost and then also carbon reduction benefit. And with that, thank you, and we would love to hear any questions or feedback.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the, my question was going to be, what are the options on renewable energy credits? And you answered that question. I appreciate that. That clarified things. Council, questions here, comments? Councilmember Mua and then Councilmember D'Alessandro. Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for doing this presentation. I think it's really exciting. It's a great opportunity and time to do it, it sounds like. As far as capturing the energy, is there, I guess, what's the use going to be? Are we capturing it into a battery, or are we selling it back to Excel? And is that how we're capturing the money back from this particular project?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mua, that really depends on what route council decides to take, but essentially the plan would be to use the electricity in the Public Works building that's produced on the roof.
Okay. And then additionally, do we look at parking lots at all to incorporate that? Because when I look at that presentation, the parking lot is very open as well. So just ideas, especially now when there's an opportunity to have funding and grant money, tying a parking lot structure to the roof, provides shades for vehicles. I don't like when my vehicle is 200 degrees when I step into it, but also allows for additional energy capture to further, recoup the money that we invest into this particular project.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mua, I should say during the Apex study, a few locations were looked at, but the city hasn't done a comprehensive assessment of all the solar opportunities. There's a lot, and definitely in casual conversation, looking at parking lots and those benefits that you mentioned of shade or not having cars snowed on are definitely something to look into. For this first project, since we haven't done any solar, Public Works looks like a good one to learn from and start to build our expertise in, and then there are definitely many more options to look into in the future.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to ask you other than to praise you all for continuing to push forward on our sustainability initiatives. I really appreciate it. I believe in the packet there were other roofs that we have in our building array that in our building fleet that we could potentially do additional projects on to get to a higher level of kilowatt hours or megawatt hours or whatever it was. Are you planning to bring to council those additional study items on those other projects in the future, or are you like early, or are you going to get this one kind of over the line, if you will, and in progress before we look at any of the other choices we might have?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, that is a great question. I know that there's some projects, for example, Big, if that moves forward, that is a very large roof, and in the Apex study, that looks like a great opportunity. And if construction and work is happening, I think it makes sense to look into some of those projects as opportunities arise. Right now, the focus, I would say, is really looking at, can we complete this project next year at Public Works? But if there are opportunities for a project such as Big, I think it makes sense as there's discussions about what's happening with those facilities to bring something forward. But
right. Okay.
No clear action on that now.
Right. Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah. So then my comment would be, it would be very hard for me to understand why this particular council wouldn't just automatically include those things going forward. I mean, we know this is important. I have solar panels on my roof today. I can tell you that I haven't paid an electric bill in a year, and they send me checks. So I know it works. Now the scale for me and my 20 solar panels is not the same as the Public Works building, but it is an investment worth making. I'd encourage anybody to do it, and I certainly think that we as the city of Bloomington on our own buildings should be just planning to do that going forward. That would be my ideal. So this is great. I can't wait to vote on it.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very quick questions here. My understanding is that the school district has done some solar projects and things like that. Is there a way that they can help us accelerate our learning curve, or have you been in contact with them on what they've done, who they've worked with, how they funded, that sort of thing?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, we haven't had direct conversations with the school district, but we know that they have done work, so I think that's a great suggestion as we move forward and embark on this to talk to our peers. We have had conversations with peer cities that have done projects for the past few years, so I think the school district is a natural next conversation.
Oh, fantastic. Do you have any recollection of what the payback period in that Apex study was? Because I just don't recall it.
That was 13 years for a bundle of projects, and we don't have those parceled out. But again, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah, fair enough. And then to Councilmember Mua's point about the parking lots, that was actually on my list. I know my daughter goes to Winona State University, and they just did a parking lot covered there. It's nice in the winter. It's nice in the summer. It's nice when it rains. So the question I had was, which would be the spring and fall, so that'd be the other seasons. The question I have is there any way to include that in the RFP to get some information for the council, for the Sustainability Commission to look at, or would that cause additional complications that would be problematic?
that, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, that would be out of the scope of just looking at public works and trying to get that project done. But if there's interest in opening it up for a larger project, I think that's something that we would need to go back and discuss.
I guess my thought process was parking at Public Works.
Gotcha.
Keep it in the same location, but see what that looks like, see what the costs are. I assume it's more expensive to, you know, build a structure to put it on than to put it on an existing structure, but what are those costs and, you know, would there be any benefit? You know, I think it might give us some additional data points to look forward to other projects if it's feasible to get into that RFP.
If council's interested in that, I think we can work and get that in there then.
Council, additional questions? Very good. If not, I agree with Councilmember D'Alessandro. I think your recommendations are spot on, and I think they're practical and common sense kind of things. So I appreciate those, and I say we full steam ahead. Let's get started on this as quickly as we can. I think that's a great idea. So.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Item 5.3 is a review or an update on our opioid task force work plan. And we've got Dr. Nick Kelly, our public health administrator here, and Aaron Abaraki. No, I missed that the first time. I had it correct when I practiced it this earlier today. Babarine. Is that correct? I'm missing the K in there, aren't I? I apologize.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Irene Babakani.
Babakani, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Glad to be here to talk about opioids. As a city manager knows, I thought we might have been able to do this work plan a little faster. Reality, with some staff transitions and maternity leaves and other things. And our partners are also really busy. It took us a little bit longer to be here, but I'm glad we're here tonight to talk about some of the transformative work that we're going to be able to see in the community over the next 18 years. We've talked a lot about tobacco in front of this council, and a lot of that work was generated by settlements that were really initiated here in Minnesota to change the way we think about commercial tobacco. This is the same opportunity we have with opioids now. So to set a little context for this, this is from the Hennepin County dashboard that just went live about 3 weeks ago. That sets how many individuals in Hennepin County received an ER visit or hospitalizations related to opioids. And so you can see it hovers around 10,000. Opioids is the second leading cause of hospitalizations or ER visits. Alcohol is just under 33,000 visits as of last year, and cannabis is about 7,200. And so just put that in context, but opioids is very unique because it's often a very acute life and death situation. And so if somebody is having an overdose, they need immediate, and by immediate I mean within minutes of an intervention, often with Narcan, to survive. This looks at the unfortunate reality we've seen in the last few years with opioid-related deaths. And so Minnesota is somewhere in that 920 to 980. Death statistics are sometimes messy to clean up, and so they change a little bit in the last year. In Hennepin County, our county partners have geocoded all the data in Hennepin, so we know we had 340 Hennepin residents die in 2021. And then this is looking at a little bit more local data from our colleagues in PD. And you can see Bloomington had a little bit of a spike in opioid deaths in 2022. We're still working to try and really understand exactly what was going on there. But one of the things that I want you to see out of this is our volume. So the total number of individuals we're providing Narcan, and that is largely the incredible work of our police department here, and how many of them are non-fatal. That is a testament to the incredible work that our PD does to take care of individuals and rapidly respond to a 911 call.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. To build on the data that Nick has shared, I'll speak to some of the specifics about the opioid settlement in the context of implementation for Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield. As you are probably aware, in August 2021, the Office of the Minnesota Attorney General joined a $26 billion multi-state settlement agreement involving distributors McKesson, Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, and manufacturer Johnson & Johnson. Of this settlement, counties and cities receive 75% of the funding, and 25% is allocated to the state to be distributed by the Opioid Epidemic Advisory Council. This settlement is an 18-year payout. Payments from Johnson & Johnson will run through 2031, and the second wave of payments from the remaining distributors will run through 2038. This slide shows the settlement amounts that have been allocated to each of the three cities. Please note that this is not a comprehensive list. However, the total for Bloomington for both waves of funding stands at over $1.8 million over the 18 years, averaging out to a proposed expenditure of $100,000 per year. And the total amount for the three cities is over $3.5 million, which is an average proposed expenditure of approximately $200,000 over the 18 years across the three cities. So local public health has been charged to make decisions and determine where the funding will have the largest impact. MDH has recommended the Johns Hopkins Principles of Spending as a framework to be used in guiding opioid program design. This framework that you see was created with the intention that states, cities, and counties may want guidance on how to effectively allocate and prioritize their allocation of the opioid settlement funding. I will, in the interest of time, try to go through these fairly quickly. The guiding principles are, firstly, crisis response, in other words, spending money to save lives. In discussions thus far, the needs from schools and healthcare have already been expressed. For example, with the ability to get Narcan over the counter and the supply of Narcan to prevent overdoses, other support to employ a more robust and comprehensive approach to save lives has been to support the comprehensive approach has been suggested. Another program suggestion has been to implement also a crisis hotline that is able to provide real-time support to individuals who are experiencing an immediate need for help. Jurisdictions are recommended to use the funds to supplement rather than fill funding and resource gaps that may exist. The second principle is a focus on data and using evidence to guide spending. There is an encouragement to tap into the substantial body of evidence that exists that supports the work that is proven to yield successful outcomes and to build on best practices that such evidence supports. This extends to the decisions around funding and the data that supports how to effectively allocate resources. The third is a focus on youth prevention. This is to make a long-term investment in effective programs that support youth, children, and families, and specifically work with schools and educational institutions. The fourth is a focus on racial equity, as in other areas that we see in public health. There is a stark need to incorporate racial equity in all program design and allocation of resources. As we know, various communities experience disparities because of years of discriminatory policies, which have now resulted in substantial increases in overdoses in those same communities. For this reason, the guidance is to direct significant funding to communities affected by these disparities. And finally, the fifth principle is requiring to develop a fair and transparent process for deciding where to spend the funding. This process should be guided by public health leaders, active engagement of people and families with lived experience, clinicians, as well as other key groups and partners. For the next few slides, I'll provide a brief update on the work that has been done thus far. One development has been a resource webpage that has now been made available on the City of Bloomington website. Here is a landing page where visitors can access an overview of the settlement, read about general information on the opioid crisis, and know the contacts at Public Health to reach for questions. The second pertinent update for Council today is to report back from our Opioid Action Planning Work Group. These sessions were held in May and took place over 2 evenings with open invitation to the community, staff from all 3 cities, community partners, and public health staff. You can see some of the partners who attended represented here. and took part in at least one of the sessions. Not all partners are represented here, and we anticipate and hope that our network of partners will continue to grow as we move further along in the implementation of our strategies. As illustrated in these images, the sessions were interactive and entailed a true brainstorming and listening to various perspectives and needs. At each session, we had a group of 10 to 15 participants with subsequent sharing of information with all participants who were unable to attend. We also held a virtual session to review the outcomes of the two sessions and allowed time for additional contributions. In general, there is a great deal of energy and enthusiasm for work to begin and for implementation of interventions that will be made available in the community soon. From our discussions and the work groups, 5 key areas emerged which lined up well with the implementation principles that were discussed earlier. These were administration, data and evaluation, marketing and education, partnerships, and rapid response. Given that the funding is for 18 years, there is a need for a more comprehensive long-term discussion based on data that is available. However, the focus of the action planning team was to discuss a work plan in the immediate term. The group stated that the purpose of the next 18 months would be to remediate the opioid crisis through accessible community-based prevention strategies and equitable access to systems, and to do so through the 5 strategies formally mentioned. Specifically, in the next 18 months, the focus would be to build an infrastructure for the opioid response of the 3 cities, to focus on accessible and community-based prevention and access to systems, which includes mapping of and linkage to services that individuals can access for support that they may need. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of the objectives and activities that the work planning group came up with. However, I will highlight in the following 2 slides the emphasis to work collaboratively with schools, to implement an effective communication plan, to increase community partnerships, to build a more cohesive and coordinated response, and to work directly with our first responders in Bloomington to meet needs in the community. As a simple timeline of foreseen activities from this point, we anticipate the implementation of our plan beginning with hiring of staff to keep the momentum of work going in a focused way. We hope this will result in us drawing lessons from our activities and that we can report back to council periodically and that can inform the future of our programming. The pivots we make across the 18-year span will be important to assess the impact we have had in addition to the data we collect as we do so. So with that, I would like to thank City Council for their support, all those who participated in the planning, including community partners, the police and fire departments of the 3 cities, and the cities of Bloomington, Edina, and Richfield in general for their support and partnership. We're looking forward to seeing our efforts come to fruition and make a difference in our communities in an area of such great need and importance. We're happy to take questions and comments that you may have.
Thank you very much for that. Council questions. Councilmember Lohman and Councilmember Martin.
Just a real quick question. You know, here the 18 years, and I'm always looking for opportunities, and I don't know how the settlement works. I'm fairly ignorant about in terms of how that works. But is there any way in which that, you know, because I mean, 18 years can go pretty quick, and next thing you know, you're much older. Is there any way to endow some of this money or to make it so that we can, I don't know, really kind of make sure on an ongoing basis or a long-term kind of basis that we have some of these dollars? Because you know, the way I kind of look at it, and I look at our data book that we've had, is that our demographics are going to continue to change, especially from an economic standpoint. And I just wonder if we could do kind of like we did with our art center, you know, that was endowed at a certain period of time. So I just wonder if we're thinking creatively, and maybe we already are, but I want to just ask that question.
So from a process standpoint, Mayor, Councilmember Lohman, our intention with this work is to really focus on some policy and system environment changes so that we're changing some of those structures that are facilitating some of this challenge today. I don't know if the attorney would have insight onto that, because I don't believe that endowment is in the settlement fund.
And maybe it can't even be done, and I don't know if you know we need to answer that here, but I guess then my concern would be, my greatest fear is when we start these programs, not to say we shouldn't, is how are we going to continue this, to sustain this, that at 18 years we don't just cut it off. It's just so important that whenever we do these things that we are able to keep it going. So that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's probably too early to determine at this point, but I know way out that 24/7 response and referral line. Do we have an idea where that exists kind of in the landscape of what may be similar resources? I know Hennepin County has addiction recovery services, obviously 911 for immediate need. Do we have an idea yet where this falls? Or I'm just wondering, is there a higher level that could handle that service as well that may have more reach and more connection?
So that was an idea that came out of some of that community development process. We've since looked at, there are a few different services out there that can do that. Okay. And kind of going back and forth with our advisory group to basically say, okay, these things do that. Are we accomplishing what needs to be accomplished that way?
Gotcha.
Likely it is.
Okay, that makes sense. I just know, but especially in the nonprofit sector, it's good to increase collaboration and bringing people together close. But if everybody's referring everybody to everywhere, it goes in a circle for a little while. So that's all I got.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Martin, if I may add, I think part of the activities will also include a mapping of not just that type of a service, but services in general, because there are gaps that need to be identified and are being identified through these work planning groups.
Councilmember Carter and then Councilmember D'Alessandro. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. So just wanted to thank you for making the point that several of the objectives will be around changes to policies and systems, which then in and of itself, those changes make them more sustainable and long-lasting. Mm-hmm. But to that point, and it doesn't need to be answered now, I'm wondering if you do have more details on specific outcomes that you would want to see associated with the different objectives. And maybe it's too early for that, or maybe they're still kind of in development. Like just hearing about, I'm so used to random stuff like that happening, having kids, that it didn't even faze me. Like, I'm just like, okay, I'll just keep talking. No worries, no worries. I don't know what I was saying, but no worries, no. Yes, so just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, ultimately, our higher level objective is we don't want to see any fatal cases, and then we also don't want to see repeated overdoses, and we want to prevent the initiation of that addiction pathway. And so those are the things we're putting in place at the high level. So in 18 years, we can be talking about those successes. Some of those things we expect will happen quicker. The prevention of the initiation, the repeated, those things are going to require some larger system changes. What we're often running into is individuals that get Narcan, successfully come out of that overdose, and make a choice that say, I want to get help. The services out there right now are taxed, and it's often you have to wait weeks or months to get that help, and sometimes somebody may often have another interaction with opioids that requires Narcan again. And so breaking that cycle is going to take a bit of time, but that's something that our goal in coordination, we're also coordinating very closely with our partners in Hennepin and Minneapolis to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction so that we can work to achieve those goals.
Is that partly the reason to have or to pilot having a licensed therapist in the police department?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, those are some of the things that we're thinking about.
Okay.
Looking with our partners in law enforcement's leadership to try and come up with innovative approaches.
Okay, so what's laid out here isn't necessarily set in stone. It's still a work in progress, like I mentioned before. Okay, and then is the state facilitating any kind of like statewide learning network for those who are getting the grants so that we can be sharing across public health departments about things that are working or not working, or maybe where we can leverage resources and not have to duplicate efforts?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, the state is working towards that effort. In the interim, while the state works on hiring some staff, the local Public Health Association of Minnesota was able to receive an AmeriCorps, a Public Health Corps member, and they have become the de facto opioid expert in local public health, attending more than their fair share of legislative hearings and understanding process. And so they've just become this fountain of knowledge, helping coordinate and host meetings across local public health agencies in Minnesota so that that work is happening already.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, apologies, Councilmember Carter. I was trying to look up a statistic, and that is not what I found. Very quick question. I assume that our fire and EMS are also trained on Narcan delivery. Is that right? I know you mentioned the police department. They're great. But do we have, as our firefighters are coming in, now that we're moving to a full-time staff, do they also get that training?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, yes. Our first responders, more often than not, if fire's there, Alina is also there.
Mm-hmm.
But all of our PD and fire are capable of doing that.
Okay. Do we have enough Narcan, generally speaking, or is a portion, and what portion of the dollars that we're getting through these settlements, do they go to direct service, meaning are we buying Narcan with it?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, one of the tasks that we tackled with this process is we are not going to pay for things that we're currently doing.
Okay.
So all of this funding is going to new and innovative and system change work.
Okay.
So it is not paying for Narcan being used in the community.
Okay. Before my last question here, if anybody hasn't, I highly recommend that you read the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel that came out from Barbara Kingsolver this year called Demon Copperhead. It is an incredible fictional tale of Appalachia and how it was devastated by the opioid crisis, as told through the lens of a foster child. It describes in incredibly raw detail how devastating this is, and as we know, we will never be able to recover the millions of lives that have been impacted by the just abject greed associated with the pharmaceutical companies taking advantage of these people. I mean, there are things that you read and you just can't believe it. So I highly recommend that book if anybody hasn't read it. It's incredible. Are there plans, and maybe this is the systematic change that you and Councilmember Carter you were referring to truly invest in like long-term treatment facilities with some of these dollars? I say that because, as I ride along with the police every month, as I've been doing since I got on council, I know that the conversations I have when it comes to drug overdoses and the work that they do, the recidivism rate on this stuff is incredible, and it's really hard. They can take somebody off the street and put them in an Alina, ambulance and take them to HCMC or whatever, and 2 days later they're back out because they just don't have a place to put these people who really desperately need a long-term program. And frankly, then we know that environmentally, if they go back right to the people that are their support network, and that support network is damaged irrevocably by opioid addiction, that they are in an environment where it's very difficult not to use again. And, in fact, at the end, not to spoil the end of the book, but, it becomes necessary for one of the characters to just not be where he was in order to finally break the habit, right? And so I just wonder if you know of anything systematically between Hennepin or Minnesota to fund like a long-term treatment facility where these folks are around an environment for a period of time that's long enough to guarantee that they can break these cycles. Is that part of the conversation? If you don't know that, that's okay. I'm truly interested in. I just don't want it to be a short-term problem, a short-term solution to what is obviously a long-term problem.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, that is an astute point that has come up in conversations. The conversations with our first responder colleagues. We can do amazing things on our end to fix or improve processes, but if it interacts with a system that doesn't work on those aspects, it only goes so far. And so those are conversations that I know are happening. Those challenges are something we frequently bring up when we're having conversations with our partners in Minneapolis and Hennepin and MDH. How that's going to change right now, I don't think we have a clear path forward, but everybody recognizes those challenges, and there's only so far this work will go without addressing some of those.
Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is, are the funds tied and limited to opioid by itself? Because when I think about what's happening in this country, 70s and 80s, it was crack cocaine, 2000s to 2010s, it's opioids. What's it going to be in 18 years? If there's a fundamental shift, can we shift those dollars and support what's going on in addition to the work we're doing to prevent the current situation? So are they tied? Do we have to use it on opioids alone, or is there a possibility to shift later on?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mua, the funds are tied to opioids. There is some flexibility in some of the allowable duties of the settlement. So, for instance, you can do training on and do support for youth mental health associated with substance use, or youth that have challenging conditions associated with mental health that put them at risk for a substance use disorder. So that on that end, some of that language is not specific just to opioids, but it's substance use and it's addressing some of the root causes. So there is some flexibility built into the settlement for that, but it is focused at opioids.
And if I may add, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Mua, we have had also discussions about, although the funding that we receive is very specific and tied to opioids, we also get funding or are anticipating funding for cannabis work and tobacco work, which is very much in a lane, but we have talked about how some of the activities that intersect can support each other and thinking about how that could look.
Council, anything else? So, and I believe this was labeled as this was a presentation of your work plan. At what point are we to formally adopt the work plan, or is there a next step for the council, and what's the next step within the work plan?
So, Mr. Mayor, council members, the work plan is kind of sitting there as looking for that feedback and direction. If you saw something that you wanted us to change, we did not bring it from a formal adoption for tonight, but the advisory group this is where they want to drive and wanted to make sure it was in line with where council thinks it should be going.
Very good. Mr. Verbrugge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I think mentioned earlier, Dr. Kelly and team will be making presentations to our partners in Edina and Richfield too. They have requested similar information. So I think after we hear from all three of the elected bodies, hopefully we'll have some consensus that this is the right direction and we can proceed at that point.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
I'm sorry, just a really quick question. Are you presenting to the Advisory Board of Health? I feel like this was on their work plan, but I can't quite remember.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Carter, we have an Advisory Board of Health member that sits on the advisory group, and so there are monthly updates provided to the Advisory Board of Health about what's going on and how that's working. It's an Advisory Board member that is professionally a pharmacist and has a great deal of experience in this work.
Thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the update, and thank you for your work on this important topic.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Council, item 5.4 is our last agenda item of the evening. This is our City Council policy and issue update. We will start I will kick it off as I typically do. Our listening session tonight included a single person, Trey Lowe, stopped by and wanted to talk about our active transportation plan. He is a bike rider, and he's got a number of different ideas and suggestions. He was also a bit frustrated because by the time he became aware of the Let's Talk Bloomington portion, Let's Talk Bloomington page that was being used to gather input regarding the active transportation plan, by the time he got there, it was closed. And so we talked about that, gave him some recommendations on how to continue to bring comments forward and continue to be part of the discussion on this important plan. And also just had a good and interesting conversation with him. It's, I think, another example of our listening sessions attracting people who typically wouldn't necessarily come forward. He actually said he was not wild about coming in front of the council in this format, but appreciated the rather informal setting that we had and the opportunity to have a discussion. So I think another success story of our listening sessions where people who otherwise wouldn't appear in front of the council come in for a nice conversation, and I think go away satisfied with the conversation that we had and the outcomes of what they were bringing forward. So I thought it was a good conversation today. He was our only person who came forward, and I was glad to meet Trey. So I have nothing else to add. Mr. Verbrugge, anything to add for our update tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two items. First, Bloomington Pride celebration is Sunday, September 10th, and we have a table that is reserved for the city, and city council members are more than welcome. If you wish to help table at the event, please contact Mr. Brillhart, and we will make sure to include you on the list and help us prepare for that event. The second item is it's International Week here in Bloomington. So in addition to the wonderful visit from the mayoral delegation and the student delegation of Izumi City, we have another group of young people coming through later this week. The organization Global Synergy Group is hosting 30 Ukrainian youth for 5 weeks. They just arrived last week. Their first week focuses on governance, and they will be in Bloomington on Thursday for most of the day, listening to experiences from Bloomington in community building and building strong cities. And staff has put together what I think is going to be a really engaging presentation for them in the morning. And then they'll be visiting the South Loop area and the refuge in the afternoon. And our friends at the Mall of America will be hosting them later in the afternoon as well. So this is a wonderful program. This is the second year we've had a big group of young people from Ukraine coming here. And obviously with the issues that they have back in their country, it's a nice opportunity that we can provide to give them a unique perspective and hope that they can utilize that in the future. So Thursday morning, if you happen to be available, we'd certainly encourage you to stop in and say hi. The mayor will be hopefully providing a greeting to them. We have to get you the details on that. I know you were waiting for that, but if others would like to be here, we can certainly incorporate that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Verbrugge. Definitely looking forward to that. Others? Councilmember Lohman, and then Councilmember D'Alessandro. Councilmember Lohman.
I'll try to be quick here. I wanted to just mention the passing of Kay Aho was in the Star Tribune. I had worked with her as a member of the League of Women Voters, and I just wanted to mention her commitment to just thousands and thousands of hours of making sure that our Bloomington elections were clean and transparent, and then also her commitment to making sure that young people were engaged in Bloomington all across it, and many other things too. But I want to keep the remarks short here. But I was really sad to hear of her passing. We're supposed to be going to the Cornerstone celebration this fall, so I hope that I'll be able to keep that legacy moving on with that. And then I wanted to just ask one other question. I'm not looking for an answer today, but any other updates on the DMV at all? The private DMV. I know we were talking about that at one point in time. Any inklings of that might be coming about in Bloomington?
Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman, we have not had any contact from the private party that was interested in operating the DMV for quite some time.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I had a quick question. First off, I believe that our review of recommendations by the staff regarding updates to our cannabis legislation is coming in on the 28th. Is that correct? Okay. In the meantime, is smoking in parks already prohibited by the current information that we have? I felt like it didn't need to be called out to say, like, if you can't smoke here, it doesn't really matter what it is that you're smoking, you can't smoke it. Is that true?
Mr. Mayor and council members, our ordinance, our local ordinance, prohibits the use of tobacco in parks.
Okay.
And so I believe this. I'm not a lawyer, you know this, but sometimes I play one on TV, so I'll wait to get daggers here from next to me, that cannabis is not necessarily defined as a tobacco. And so part of the discussion will be whether we want to revise our ordinance to specify that.
Okay. Our signs don't explicitly say that. Just at Bush Lake West, for example, this weekend, and it just says smoking is prohibited here. So I don't know if we need reconciliation of all of that or if we should genericize the language then, and we could talk about that when it comes on the 28th. Okay. Then the only other thing I wanted to mention is something that makes me very excited, and I've talked about this with folks around my district a lot. I was so thrilled to see that we are having goats help us out with our buckthorn at Harrison Park. I know that sounds crazy, but it is a wonderfully natural and valuable solution for this problem, and I'm very excited about it. I believe Harrison Park is right over here, just south of or just north of Moy Park here, and it's happening, right? Is it happening at this moment, or are they there over the next couple weeks? It doesn't say explicitly when they're coming, so I want to make sure I get out there with my camera, but everybody should know that Harrison Park's going to have goats. I think it's really valuable, and kudos to Dave Hansen for taking all the tools in the toolbox as we talk about our natural resources management and especially our invasive species management and pulling that one out because it makes me extra happy. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember D'Alessandro, appreciate you pointing that out. This is not the first year that we have enlisted our goat friends in helping us with invasive species eradication and control. Before Harrison, I believe that we have used them in the area below the pond house. The Gideon Pond House, and I want to say that Tarnhill Park was one of those places.
In Normandale, and right by the Japanese Gardens.
Right. So goats, in addition to being well-liked by humans for this purpose, are actually pretty effective. So it is a relatively inexpensive and quality resource management approach.
I'm not, I guess what I'm saying here is if as part of our natural resources management office, we wanted to build into our ongoing budget, regular use of them, I think we could, I know that I would support that. Yeah. What did you say?
Yeah.
Well, that would
Mr. Mayor and council members, at the risk of causing our staff to have a little freak out moment here, because, all sorts of weird things happen after 10 o'clock. We have a nursery for trees, so, who's to say we can't have a nursery for goats too. So.
I think you should talk to John over at Animal Control first. Thank you very much.
Council, anything additional? If not, Council, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn tonight.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second to adjourn this evening. No further council discussion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you much, Council, for your work this evening. Thank you to the staff. Great presentations, a lot of information tonight. Thanks to everybody who tuned in and who joined us this evening. Have a great Tuesday in your week.